Chapter 476. After eating and drinking their fill, everyone began to rest in the camp that was set up early in the morning. Zhou Luo summoned the dark snake Japalura, which he had just formed a contract with not too long ago, to keep him company during the night on the island. On the other hand, the lava dragon lizard continued to help the ethereal jellyfish shatter the rocks at the bottom of the sea and collect the floating silver threads hidden under the seabed. Not long after, a deafening snoring sound came from Lu Jie's tent. Clearly Lu Jie was exhausted. The mother of bloodbath and endless summer continued to split the cold snow pine. It had to be said that the mother of bloodbath was a professional when it came to dismantling spiritual materials. The cold snow pine was almost done dissecting, but the mother of bloodbath had not left a single dregs. The mother of bloodbath had even turned the cold snow pine's bark into hemp silk. To plan to bring it back for Wenyu to make something for Lin Yuan. Listen took advantage of the moonlight to train the pain illusory fox and the three-tailed crimson fox. By directing the pain illusory fox and the three-tailed crimson fox to fight, Listen strengthened their combat skills and tacit understanding. As he watched, he realized that Listen was commanding the pain illusory fox and the three-tailed crimson fox to fight. He had his own unique understanding of combat techniques. He had enhanced the Silver 7/Fantasy Eye Pain Illusory Fox. The Pain Illusory Fox was considered rather outstanding among spiritual type fays. The Illusory Pain Fox used pain as a medium to control and damage its target. It could be said that it was a combat style that took into account both control and output in an invisible and intangible manner. Of course, compared to the Silver 7/Fantasy Eye Pain Illusory Fox, the Silver 3/Fantasy Eye Three-Tailed Crimson Fox's aptitude was better. At the same time, in terms of skill combinations, the Three-Tailed Crimson Fox could work well with Listen's Pain Illusion Fox. The Three-Tailed Crimson Fox's three large and fluffy tails were always burning with red fox fire, making it look like a fire tribute fae. However, the Three-Tailed Crimson Fox was a spiritual type fae through and through. The Leaping Foxfire was an exclusive skill of the Three-Tailed Crimson Fox. Every foxfire that hit the target could continuously weaken the target's mental state and resistance. As a result, all of the Pain Illusory Fox and Three-Tailed Crimson Fox's spiritual type skills, be it damage or control effects, would be multiplied. At the same time, the Three-Tailed Crimson Fox also possessed a powerful single-target control skill called Charm. In a one-on-one duel, every spirit chi professional would have multiple phases. If you wanted to win in a duel, you needed to have the ability to kill your opponent. Thus, the Three-Tailed Crimson Fox, who had extremely strong control abilities, did not perform too well in a duel. However, in the team competition, the Three-Tailed Crimson Fox's powerful single-target control ability could control the enemy team's core fae very well. Could play a crucial role at a crucial moment. When Listen, who was training, saw Lin Yuan walking toward him, he immediately stopped the Pain Illusory Fox and Three-Tailed Crimson Fox from fighting. The Three-Tailed Crimson Fox stopped fighting and laid down beside Listen's legs, curling up on the ground lazily. Its three fluffy tails gently stroked Listen's trousers, looking very pleased. The Pain Illusory Fox called out softly to Listen, who nodded. The snow-white Pain Illusory Fox ran to Lin Yuan in a few steps and placed its small paw on his leg. It stepped on him twice as a greeting. Then he turned around and returned to Listen's side. Clearly, the Pain Illusory Fox still remembered that Lin Yuan had promoted its grade and quality. Listen hurriedly asked, thinking that Lin Yuan had come over because he had some instructions. "Young master, is Brother Zhou looking for help in the sea?" Lin Yuan shook his head and reached out to touch the hair on the back of his head. "Listen, I think your age and strength are suitable. Do you have any plans to join a club-like guild to compete in the S tournament?" Lin Yuan remembered that when Listen had talked about his Star Web achievements, it seemed like he had only reached the 10th floor of the Star Tower. Given Listen's strength, it shouldn't be a problem for him to reach the Celestial Stairway, let alone the Star Pagoda's 10th level. However, Listen had never fought, which meant that he probably didn't like competitive duels. Even if Listen swore loyalty to himself with a willpower rune, he wouldn't be able to do such a thing. Lin Yuan still had to follow Listen's personal wishes. Listen was startled and asked subconsciously, "What do you mean by that?" "Me." After being stunned for a moment, Listen could not help but recall when he was young. His family's elders had nurtured him, the only child of the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce, on how to manage it and develop its faction. Even if his family's elders were willing to pour more than half of the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's resources into him and let him have excellent phase and strength, they never allowed him to duel in the Star Tower. However, he had never allowed himself to fight in the Star Tower. He felt that it was a waste of time to learn how to manage the Chamber of Commerce and develop his faction. Slowly, Listen got used to it. No matter how much he liked to duel in the Star Tower, he no longer thought about the wanton and happy feeling when dueling in the Star Tower. After his family died at sea, Listen supported the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce by himself for 3 years, working day and night. He didn't have the energy to duel in the Star Tower anymore. However, he would occasionally train his phase when he had the time to improve his combat skills by sparring with each other. Listen never expected that Lin Yuan would invite him to join a club-like guild now. Listen was naturally very willing to do so. He just couldn't believe it. After Listen led the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce to pledge loyalty to Lin Yuan immediately poured a lot of resources into the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. But up until now he hadn't achieved anything. If Lin Yuan had not sent someone to protect him in secret, Listen knew that he would have died in the royal capital and would not have lived until now. During this period of contact with Lin Yuan, Listen could feel that he was a very easygoing person without any airs. She could even make people feel very comfortable when interacting with Lin Yuan. However, Listen had never forgotten his identity as a servant. But now that Lin Yuan had invited him, he clearly didn't treat him as a servant. Instead, he had already placed him in the position of a partner. This made Listen feel incomparably touched. Upon hearing Listen's question, Lin Yuan smiled and explained. Brother Lu and I have established a guild club, and we plan to participate in next year's tournament. The guild's name will be Dome Guild Club. Currently, the Dome Club's main team only consists of me and Brother Lu. If you join, you'll be the third person in the Dome Club. Second, more seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. End of chapter. Chapter 477. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's explanation and another invitation, Lin Yuan's eyes widened. Listen bent down and picked up the Pain Illusory Fox and the Three-Tailed Crimson Fox. I'm willing. I will develop the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce into a rising force within 4 months and also improve my strength. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan stretched out his hand. His palm stopped in midair as he spoke. Welcome to the third member of the Dome Club. When Listen saw Lin Yuan's outstretched hand, he also reached out and gently placed his hand on the back of Lin Yuan's hand. He had fulfilled his promise as a teammate. At the same time, Listen made a decision. It seemed like it was time for him to head to the Star Web for a Star Web duel. If Lin Yuan really participated in next year's tournament, given his and Lu Jie's strength, they would definitely be able to win the title of a B-class guild club. The Dome Guild Club had Black and the Radiance 100 sequence member Lu Jie. As long as the lineup of the team was announced, it would definitely attract countless gazes. Listen knew that it was impossible for him to become a Radiance 100 sequence member with his strength. However, if they could fight their way to the top of the celestial stairway, they wouldn't have to reveal their lineup. He had exposed himself to too much controversy. Since he had joined the team, he had become a member of the team. They needed to have irreplaceable value in the team to prove that they could exist in an outstanding team. Otherwise, if he was treated as a chef, people would say that his dish was a dish that went well with rice during the one dish everyday competition. Then the big shots on Star Web would pick out some mistakes and make them into a meal collection. Listen felt that his pride could not take it. After chatting with Listen, Lin Yuan returned to his tent. After entering the tent, Lin Yuan did not rest. Instead, he entered the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone. As soon as he entered the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone, he noticed plenty of snow-white feathers on the pure land of bliss. At that moment, Morbius' voice echoed in his mind. Lin Yuan, something happened to Gray. Before Lin Yuan could ask, Morbius said, "Don't worry. The Pure Land of Bliss in the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone is connected to the Pure Land of Bliss outside the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone." Back then, the Pure Land of Bliss outside was absorbing the Heaven and Earth Grace. Gray has just recovered its genetic model and awakened. The awakened Gray has also accidentally absorbed a trace of Heaven and Earth Grace. This trace of Heaven and Earth Grace allowed Gray, which had just recovered its genetic model, to enter a state of sublimation. After hearing Morbius' words, Lin Yuan was pleasantly surprised. Back then, Gray was so weak that it looked like it could die at any moment. Now that it had completed its genetic model, it could be said that it had made a great leap. However, he didn't expect that Gray, who had just crossed the Dragon's Gate, would have another opportunity to soar into the 9 heavens. The genetic model evolution was an extremely rare and powerful mutation, and it would mostly happen in young phase. Under the condition of preserving the phase original genes, the genetic model would be more perfectly optimized. Just like the relationship between the blue flash butterfly and the blue flash purple butterfly. The blue flash purple butterfly was the result of the evolution of the blue flash butterfly's genes in the cocoon. However, the evolution of the genetic model was mostly a natural mutation during the development of the genetic model. Heaven and earth, Lin said Lin. Lin and heaven and spirit. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard Morbius speak again. Although the spirit qi in the spirit lock spatial zone is pure enough, the concentration of spirit qi isn't enough to support Gray's genetic model advancement. In order to complete Gray's genetic model sublimation, spirit qi crystals are needed. Upon hearing Morbius mention spirit qi crystals, Lin Yuan looked at the pile of spirit qi crystals again. He had a lot of spirit qi crystals, so he didn't feel the pinch if he used a few of them. Since Gray had such an opportunity, Lin Yuan naturally wouldn't let it miss it. Lin Yuan walked to the small pile of spirit qi crystals under the limestone bowl. He picked up one of the spirit qi crystals. Looking at the pile of spirit qi crystals in front of him, Lin Yuan had an incomparably fulfilling feeling. Lin Yuan didn't count the number of spirit qi crystals, but he guessed that there were at least 300 of them. If the current Bronze X/Legend Morbius were to condense so many spirit qi crystals, it would take at least 6 years to condense them. This also meant that the cold snow pine's heaven and earth grace would allow Lin Yuan to have a significant increase in strength. In fact, when Lin Yuan used these spirit qi crystals again, he did not need to be as frugal as before. Lin Yuan took one of the spirit qi crystals and walked to Gray. Gray's body was about the same size as before, but it was noticeably heavier. Gray was sleeping on the cinnabar sweet osmanthus's branch, causing the branch to bend. Gray's feathers were as white could be, and it had a golden beak and a crown that was several times redder than the cinnabar sweet osmanthus's flowers. It gave Gray an indescribable elegance even in its slumber. Lin Yuan used true data to check on Gray's attributes. Fey name, cloud crane, Fey species, feathered crane/red crane, Fey grade. Normal 1/10. Fey type, spiritual Fey quality. Normal abilities frowny face cloud transformation, turns its body into a cloud. The cloud has a certain visual shielding effect and spiritual energy detection will also be obstructed. After Gray's genetic model was completely restored, its name under true data was Cloud Crane. It was considered a spiritual type support type Fey. Lin Yuan carefully checked the information on Gray's true data. When Lin Yuan saw Gray's normal ability, his expression froze slightly. Cloud Crane Hui Hui's normal level skill, Cloud Transformation, seemed like a self-defense ability. It could effectively prevent physical attacks from harming itself. However, Gray's Cloud Transformation actually had a concealment effect that prevented detection. This allowed Gray's normal ability to be used as an anti-detection ability. Gray's normal ability, Cloud Transformation, was too conspicuous on land, and the cloud concealment could only be used as an area of effect concealment ability. But what if it was used in the boundless flowing clouds in the sky? The strategic significance would be completely different. Especially when Gray's grade and quality increased, the range of Cloud Transformation would increase, and the concealment effect would become stronger. By then, Gray's normal ability, Cloud Transformation, might not be useful to others, but it would be very useful to Lin Yuan. However, it was very useful to Lin Yuan. After all, he still had the floating island whale that had yet to hatch. First more. Seeking monthly votes and recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 478. In Lin Yuan's opinion, Gray's normal Cloud Transformation was a perfect match for the floating island whale. After becoming a fantasy breed, the floating island whale floated in the sky. No matter how high it floated, it was still too huge. Even if Lin Yuan had the spatial teleportation source type ethereal jellyfish, he could use its exclusive skill to establish a space tunnel between the sky city and the ground to complete the interaction between the sky and ground resources. However, this was not a perfect solution. The floating island whale's role had never been just a floating land in the sky but a deterrent war fortress. Although the floating island whale itself wasn't strong, Its true strength lay in the war and defensive attacks it carried on its back. Moreover, the floating island whale's flying speed was extremely fast, and it was the best way to travel back and forth between the continents in this huge world. Lin Yuan could not always choose to hide such a war fortress in the sky. If he really hid the floating island whale, it would be like throwing away the watermelon to pick the sesame seed. However, with the cloud crane, even if the floating island whale soared in the sky, it could always hide in the depths of the clouds. The visual shielding effect of Gray's cloud transformation was extremely useful. At the same time, it had a certain ability to obstruct spiritual detection. This meant that as long as Gray was strong enough, the effect of cloud transformation would be stronger. The sky city on the floating island whale's back could become a legend that only existed in the sky beyond the clouds. The more Lin Yuan thought about it, the more excited he became. Then he crushed the spirit chi crystal. He let Morbius guide the majestic spirit chi in the spirit chi crystal to fall on Gray's sleeping body for it to absorb. However, after using the spirit chi crystal, Gray did not see any effect. Lin Yuan frowned slightly and reached out to place his hand on Gray's back. He circulated the spiritual power in his body and guided the huge spirit chi in the spirit lock spatial zone into Gray's body. As the huge spirit chi wandered on the surface of Gray's body, Lin Yuan could feel that every inch of Gray's cells was like the mother of bloodbath that had starved for decades. He frantically absorbed the spiritual chi that entered his body. In the end, when the pure spirit chi broke through Gray's body surface, it was instantly absorbed by the cells on the inner and outer layer of Gray's skin. There was no chance for the spirit chi to enter Gray's body. After feeling it, Lin Yuan knew that if he wanted Gray's genetic model to sublimate, the number of spirit chi crystals needed would definitely not be small. There had never been a special case of a fae being able to sublimate its genetic model by absorbing world cleansing. In other words, Gray's genetic model upgrade was a miracle created by the epic of nature's life by chance. Although the genetic model sublimation could be forcibly interrupted. However, interrupting the evolution of the genetic model was tantamount to depriving Cloud Crane of a chance to soar into the sky. In other words, it was equivalent to him personally destroying a miracle created in the Epic of Life chapter. Since he had decided to contract Gray, it would be the same as when he had chosen to nurture Chimey and Genius. Genius was just a housekeeping beast that wasn't even a fae, while Chimey was a songstress bird that had failed to evolve into a normal fae. However, Lin Yuan still resolutely led them on a path that no one had ever walked before. Lin Yuan grabbed a handful of spirit chi crystals from the pile and returned to Gray's side. Every time he crushed a spirit chi crystal, he would let Morbius absorb the huge amount of pure spirit chi contained in it. He guided it into Gray's body. 20. Gray's absorption of the spirit chi in the spirit chi crystal finally slowed down after consuming the 25th spirit chi crystal. When the 30th spirit chi crystal had been consumed by more than half, Yunwei finally stopped absorbing the spirit chi. At that moment, all the feathers on Gray's body fell off. These feathers did not fall to the ground. Instead, they floated around Gray's body. Gray continued to experience the process of growing feathers and then falling off. Lin Yuan finally understood why there were so many white feathers on the pure land of bliss in the spirit lock spatial zone. However, the more Lin Yuan looked at Gray's newly grown feathers, the more he realized that each time Gray's feathers fell off, it would be different from before. Every time a new feather grew, it was as though the feather had been meticulously sculpted and optimized. Lin Yuan realized that Gray's feathers were much better than when he had let the source sand use its metal-consume manifestation. It was much better than the divine travel black swallow's feathers. Finally, on Chimey's latest feather, the tip of the feather had a faint golden pattern. It gave Chimey's originally elegant aura a hint of profoundness. Lin Yuan realized that the newly grown feather with the golden pattern was even better than Gray's perfect feathers. The feathers that had been floating around Gray's body were now attached to its body. They formed a huge white eggshell made of feathers. This huge white eggshell was beating gently as though it was nurturing the birth of a new life. When Lin Yuan used true data to check on Gray's exclusive skill, he was dumbfounded. Gray was originally a fae, but after its genetic model was optimized, it had turned from a normal fae into a heaven and earth fae like the floating island whale. Gray was no longer called a cloudy crane. It was called the sky cloudy crane. Gray's sudden transformation into a heaven and earth fae caught Lin Yuan off guard. Gray had returned to its previous state of deep slumber. It could only be reborn after it hatched from the feather eggshell. However, the contract method for heaven and earth phase was different from ordinary phase. Lin Yuan had just discovered that Gray's contract method was the same as the floating island whales. They both needed to feel the contractor's bloodline during the incubation period. After hatching, the Fae would take the initiative to form a contract with the contractor. Lin Yuan could not help but think of how Gray had always been so attached to him. In Lin Yuan's opinion, even if he did not strengthen the bloodline relationship between him and Gray. After Gray evolved into the sky cloudy crane, it would also take the initiative to form a contract with him. However, blood could strengthen the bloodline relationship with heaven and earth phase. Could also increase the spiritual connection with heaven and earth phase. Therefore, not a single drop of blood could be missing. Second update explode with new chapters afternoon tomorrow. Hehe. Seeking monthly votes and recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 479. Lin Yuan couldn't help but hold his forehead. Every time he enhanced the bloodline relationship with the floating island whale, a large amount of blood in his body would be absorbed by its crystal eggshell. It made him feel as though his body was being hollowed out. Now there was the addition of a little fellow like Gray. That was practically double the hollowing out and double the happiness. Lin Yuan felt that he really should ask Zhang Xiaobai about his maintenance tips and how he had been facing the bloody leech's devastation. Otherwise, no matter how strong his body was, he wouldn't be able to withstand the two heaven and earth phase, the floating island whale and the heaven cloud crane. Lin Yuan had 100 rejections in his mind. But his body was incomparably honest. He had already begun to strengthen the bloodline connection between him and the heaven cloud crane. The first time he strengthened his bloodline connection with Gray, he deliberately used the blood from the tip of the tongue, which was the closest to his heart's blood, just like when he had first established a bloodline connection with the floating island whale. After nearly 2 hours, Lin Yuan finally completed strengthening his bloodline connection with Gray and the floating island whale. During this period, Lin Yuan relied on the vitality released by the jasmine lily's main flower to recover his qi blood bit by bit. Otherwise, with Lin Yuan's current state, even a swimming pool would have dried up long ago. After swaying twice on the spot, Lin Yuan sat on the ground. Lin Yuan didn't care about the side effects of the jasmine lily's heal ability and let it crazily heal him for 3 minutes. That extremely comfortable feeling and the dizziness from losing too much blood almost made him fall asleep in the spirit lock spatial zone. However, after he woke up from that extremely comfortable feeling, he didn't know what to do. Lin Yuan's dizziness from losing too much blood had completely recovered. Previously, when Morbius conducted the spirit qi in the spirit qi crystal to help Gray sublimate its genetic model, there was still some spirit qi left. Morbius asked Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan, Gray only consumed more than half of the energy in the 30th energy crystal. The remaining energy should be enough to upgrade 2 to 3 bronze/epic phase from epic to legend. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan didn't even hesitate to take out the Celestine elemental shellfish, Scorching elemental shellfish, and Aquamarine elemental shellfish from the Spirit Lock spatial zone. These 3 elemental shellfish were currently bronze X/epic. If he raised the quality of these 3 elemental shellfish from epic to legendary now, the elemental shellfish would not be able to survive. Then the speed at which the Scorching elemental shellfish, Celestine elemental shellfish and Aquamarine elemental shellfish produced elemental pearls would undoubtedly be faster than before. He was now a little regretful that he had not used the spirit qi crystals to upgrade the 3 elemental shellfish from epic to legend. Who knew how many heavenly maiden grade elemental pearls he had lost in such a long time? Morbius controlled the remaining spirit energy in the 30th spirit energy crystal and injected it into the bodies of the 3 elemental shellfish. The Scorching elemental shellfish and the Celestine elemental shellfish immediately became bigger than before. The elemental patterns on the shell also became more obvious, and the color of the shellfish meat also became closer to the color of the different types of elements. When the shells opened, they would spit out misty elemental energy. This meant that the Scorching elemental shellfish and Celestine elemental shellfish had been successfully upgraded to legend. However, the quality of the Aquamarine elemental shellfish was not upgraded due to the lack of spirit energy in the spirit crystals. In such a situation, Lin Yuan could check the speed at which the bronze X/legend elemental shellfish produced elemental pearls. It was much faster than the bronze/epic elemental shellfish produced elemental pearls. Since the elemental pearls produced by elemental shellfish of different attributes were the same, Lin Yuan used it for comparison. During his 2-hour observation, Lin Yuan found that the Bronze X/Legend Scorching Elemental Shellfish produced a total of 8 elemental pearls. As for the Bronze X/Epic Aquamarine Elemental Shellfish, only 6 were produced. Such a ratio did not seem very shocking. However, as time passed, this difference of 1/4 was quantified. It was enough to be called a shocking wealth. Of course, no one else could accumulate such wealth. Unless they also had a treasure land like Morbius Spirit Lock Spatial Zone, which had a high concentration of pure spirit energy and was inexhaustible. Lin Yuan simply took out the 2 young elemental shellfish that he had exchanged from Master Jing Lu for 200 Heavenly Maiden grade elemental pearls produced by the fire-type Scorching Elemental Shellfish. Lin Yuan had already made plans for these 2 young elemental shellfish. What Lin Yuan needed to do was to induce the 2 young elemental shellfish to mutate into thick earth elemental shellfish. First of all, the Heavenly Maiden grade elemental pearls produced by elemental shellfish of different attributes could be circulated at a 1-to-1 price. Therefore, no matter what attribute Lin Yuan nurtured, there was actually not much difference in essence. Lin Yuan had chosen to evolve the 2 young elemental shellfish into thick earth elemental shellfish because the source sand wanted to increase its grade and quality. In addition to relying on the spirit chi in the spirit chi crystals, the Heavenly Maiden grade elemental pearls produced by the thick earth elemental shellfish were also an excellent choice for improvement. At the same time, the pure earth element energy in the Heavenly Maiden grade elemental pearls produced by the thick earth elemental shellfish could also temper the source sand. Under Lin Yuan's guidance, Lin Yuan soon nurtured the 2 thick earth elemental shellfish easily. After nurturing them, Lin Yuan immediately raised their grade to Bronze X/Epic. Then Lin Yuan summoned the 3 red water blood snakes with the hornless dragon bloodline that he had traded in the Indigo Azure Sea market from the amber button-shaped diamond face storage box. These 3 red water blood snakes with the hornless dragon bloodline were the raw materials needed for the Mother of Bloodbath's 3rd exclusive skill, External Blood Bone, after it had become a myth breed fae. The Mother of Bloodbath's exclusive skill and strength improvement could not be sloppy at all. Therefore, Lin Yuan had specifically asked the Mother of Bloodbath for its opinion on the choice of these 3 exclusive skills. To the Mother of Bloodbath, the exclusive skills of these 3 red water blood snakes were not important. After the Mother of Bloodbath had used the spider teeth that it had shed previously to fuse, these 3 red water blood snakes with the hornless dragon bloodline were equivalent to a part of the Mother of Bloodbath's body. Therefore, these 3 exclusive skills with the hornless dragon bloodline would all be dominated by the Mother of Bloodbath. They would become the same as the Mother of Bloodbath's exclusive skills. Therefore, when Lin Yuan enhanced these 3 red water blood snakes with the hornless dragon bloodline, he did not need to consider the choice of exclusive skills when they were promoted to bronze. First update. End of this chapter. Chapter 480. Lin Yuan looked at the 3 red water blood snakes and could not help but sigh. These 3 red water blood snakes were indeed creatures with the hornless dragon bloodline. Half a day ago he had been sprinkled with realgar powder, but now, it was as if he hadn't been hurt at all. They had all recovered and were in high spirits. He enhanced the 3 red water blood snakes with the hornless dragon bloodline. After a few hours, the red water blood snakes had all been upgraded to Bronze X/Epic. Although the exclusive skills of these 3 red water blood snakes weren't important when they were promoted to bronze, they weren't important. However, he still upgraded the 3 red water blood snakes to Elite/Epic when they reached bronze. Then he picked out the one that he thought was the strongest from the 3 exclusive skills that had appeared. After that, he took another spirit chi crystal and crushed it. Under Morbius guidance, the 3 Bronze/Epic red water blood snakes, the 2 thick earth elemental shellfish, and the aquamarine elemental shellfish that had not been successfully upgraded were strengthened. As the aquamarine elemental shellfish had absorbed a lot of high-purity spirit chi from the spirit chi crystals, it was already on the verge of breaking through to the legend quality. Therefore, all 6 Bronze/Epic phase had been promoted to legend with the help of 1 spirit chi crystal. He first stored the 3-tailed Bronze/Legend red water blood snake into a platinum phase storage box. He planned to hand them over to the Mother of Bloodbath when he returned to the royal capital. Then he placed the aquamarine elemental shellfish and celestine elemental shellfish back in their original positions. As a heaven and earth fae, the floating island whale could devour the spirit chi, water and wind elements within the spirit lock spatial zone. However, there was a limit to how much he could absorb at one time. When the aquamarine elemental shellfish and celestine elemental shellfish were at epic quality, they were just enough to supply the floating island whale. Now that the quality had been upgraded, he would be able to save one wind element heavenly maiden grade elemental pearl produced by the celestine elemental shellfish every hour. There were also heavenly maiden level water elemental pearls produced by the aquamarine elemental shellfish. As for the heavenly maiden level fire tribute elemental pearls produced by the scorching elemental shellfish, the life-form sacrificial fire in the twin red pagoda's main flower had yet to mature. Therefore, the speed at which they were collecting them was much faster than before. In addition to the 2 heavenly maiden grade earth elemental pearls produced by the thick earth shellfish, the source sand could only consume 1 pearl after a certain period of time. Therefore, Lin Yuan was basically accumulating earth-type heavenly maiden grade elemental pearls. Lin Yuan felt that although he had spent all the resources that could flow in the indigo azure sea market, he had spent them all. However, according to the current rate of accumulation of resources, he would soon become rich. With the production speed of the heavenly maiden grade elemental pearls, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him the Prince of Elemental Pearls. Lin Yuan looked at the time and realized that it was already past 5 in the morning. Lin Yuan spent another night in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. However, when he saw the elemental shellfish constantly spitting out heavenly maiden grade elemental pearls, he didn't feel tired at all. Instead, he felt extremely fulfilled. It was still early. Last night they had agreed to wake up at 7:30. There were still close to 2 hours left for him to continue enhancing phase. Lin Yuan took out the fairy source-type life form, the burning sunflower. Looking at the thumb-sized, celestial-shaped burning sunflower. Just as he held it in his hand and was about to enhance it, his expression froze. He then stored the fairy source-type life form, the burning sunflower, into the amber button-shaped diamond phase storage box. Zhou Xian and Cold Moon were now training outside and their strength must have improved. Lin Yuan didn't know how strong Zhou Xi's strength was now. Therefore, it was better to wait for Zhou Xi to return and have a better understanding of her phase. Then he would take Zhou Xi's bronze/epic Vajra butterfly and enhance it to bronze/legend together with the burning sunflower. Zhou Xi had grown up. As her elder brother, even if he wanted to be good to his younger sister, he had to respect her. Lin Yuan planned to let Zhou Xi choose the burning sunflower's exclusive skill herself. Zhou Xi was now a combat class spirit chi professional and could see the road she had to walk more clearly than others. Now Lin Yuan only hoped that after this burning sunflower was nurtured, Zhou Xi would choose it. So that Zhou Xi's combat style would not be so reckless. Iron Bucket Sister Nurturing Plan 3. 0 nurtured a sturdy iron bucket. Not a self-destructing bucket. If he nurtured Zhou Xi into a self-destructing bucket, Lin Yuan felt that he would be letting down his identity as her elder brother. After storing the burning sunflower, Lin Yuan took the blood brew grapevine out of the amber button-shaped diamond phase storage box. The blood brew grapevine that Lin Yuan had traded in the indigo azure sea market was platinum 4/epic. It was a mature heaven and earth fae. A mature heaven and earth fae like the blood brew grapevine only needed to be supplied with enough blood. The blood brew grapevine could absorb the energy in the blood and produce blood brew grapes. The blood brew grapevine had extremely high requirements for blood quality and quantity. For a platinum blood brew grapevine to produce a bunch of blood brew grapes, it needed at least 1000 platinum phase blood energy. Moreover, the blood energy in these 1000 platinum phase couldn't be supplied by ordinary blood. It had to be purified to obtain the blood essence. The blood brew grapevine also had very strict requirements for blood essence. If the blood essence's quality was not up to standard, even if it produced blood brew grapes, the grapes would be too small. Lin Yuan had previously speculated about the relationship between Red Thorn's Eye of Relinquish and the blood brew grapevine. Lin Yuan was a little apprehensive and did not know if the blood brew grapevine could absorb the Eye of Relinquish. Could it produce blood brew grapes? Lin Yuan summoned Red Thorn from the leaf-shaped diamond phase storage box. When Red Thorn saw Lin Yuan, it immediately became cheerful. It was obvious that it had evolved a large flower with gill-shaped petals and started to blow. Lin Yuan. Red Thorn. Although Red Thorn's gill-shaped flower's words were somewhat intermittent, it was obvious that Red Thorn could express what it wanted to express. During this period of time, Red Thorn's gill-shaped flower was definitely able to express what it wanted to express. During this period of time, it could be said that Genius had definitely contributed a lot. Ever since Genius had promised to teach Red Thorn to speak, it had been dutifully going to the leaf-shaped diamond face storage box to guide Red Thorn when it had nothing to do. Second update. End of this chapter. Chapter 481. The leaf-shaped diamond face storage box contained plenty of dimensional lifeforms' flesh, so the smell was extremely unpleasant. However, as long as Red Thorn's mouth of relinquish was activated, the energy wave that was emitted was enough to block out all the smells around the mouth of relinquish. When Genius entered the leaf-shaped face storage box, it would land on the flesh-shaped flower on Red Thorn's mouth of relinquish. He didn't have to stuff his nose with a paper ball made of fresh grass pulp like before. Lin Yuan realized that Red Thorn was indeed worthy of being Genius's disciple. When she acted coquettishly, she looked just like a smart girl. Upon seeing that Red Thorn could already speak simple words, Lin Yuan felt rather proud. Half a year ago, Red Thorn was just a source seed without any shape or location. But now, under his guidance, it had developed and evolved so successfully. Moreover, he found that as Red Thorn's intelligence increased, it would usually digest the flesh energy in the leaf-shaped diamond face storage box. He no longer used the mouth of relinquish to stuff food and munch like before. Instead, he began to spawn a few nibbling vines, using them to scrape the flesh and blood of the gold water world dimensional lifeforms. The flesh and blood that had been scraped into mud were then transported to the mouth of relinquish through the roots of the nibbling vines and mother plant. Then, the mouth of relinquish and tongue of relinquish would secrete acid that was most suitable for digesting the flesh and blood of water world dimensional lifeforms. To digest the gold water world dimensional lifeforms' flesh and blood. This method had obviously sped up Red Thorn's digestion. However, this wasn't as simple as speeding up the digestion. In Lin Yuan's opinion, such behavior meant that Red Thorn was starting to pay attention to its image and was slowly evolving into a lady. Previously, when Red Thorn had evolved a vine without any thorns, it had only required Lin Yuan to tie a butterfly knot. But slowly, Red Thorn felt that it would look better if Lin Yuan used 3 different colored ribbons to tie a bow knot. In half a day's time, the eye of relinquish, which had been completely depleted, had been devoured by Red Thorn. Almost half of the eyes of relinquish had already grown, which was close to 30 eyes of relinquish. Lin Yuan said to Red Thorn, "Red Thorn, can you remove the eye of relinquish that is used to store flesh energy?" Originally, Red Thorn was still playing with the 10 huge red gill-shaped flowers. However, after hearing Lin Yuan's question, Red Thorn immediately became well-behaved and urged its spore cavity to spit out some spores. The spores spat out by Red Thorn gave birth to 2 nibbling vines under Lin Yuan's feet. Red Thorn transmitted an eye of relinquish over through the rhizome that was connected to the nibbling vines. The 2 nibbling vines then rolled up the eye of relinquish and obediently handed it to Lin Yuan. Although Red Thorn's eyes of relinquish could only grow 60 eyes at most, Red Thorn's eyes of relinquish were extremely powerful. The eyes of relinquish that were condensed during the battle would immediately become an important method for Red Thorn to spread out its sea of flowers or attack. However, he had seen Red Thorn remove the eyes of relinquish from the mouth of relinquish when it was not in combat. He used this smooth vine without any spikes to treat the eye of relinquish as a toy. It was also because of this discovery that Lin Yuan had seen the blood brew grapevine. That was why he had the thought of using the eye of relinquish to nurture the blood brew grapevine. The mouth of relinquish's digestion speed had always been extremely fast. However, Red Thorn's absorption speed was relatively slow when it wanted to upgrade its level and quality. This also caused the mouth of relinquish to be in a low-frequency state after it was filled with eyes of relinquish. Only when the number of eyes of relinquish is less than 60. Only then would Red Thorn circulate the mouth of relinquish to a high-frequency state and store the excess energy from the flesh and blood that it digested into the eye of relinquish. Therefore, Lin Yuan's wanton consumption of the eyes of relinquish would not slow down Red Thorn's improvement in strength and quality. He just needed to consume more dimensional creatures' flesh. He took one of Red Thorn's eyes of relinquish and placed it at the roots of the blood brew grapevine. As a Platinum 4/Epic blood brew grapevine, It could already feed on its own through its roots. If the Eye of Relinquish contained pure flesh energy, the blood brew grapevine wouldn't be able to absorb it. In that case, he could only go and purchase Platinum Phase Essence blood on Star Web. He would use the Platinum Phase Essence blood to nurture the blood brew grapevine. This would allow the blood brew grapevine to bear blood brew grapes. After placing the Eye of Relinquish on the blood brew grapevine's roots, Lin Yuan held his breath and observed the blood brew grapevine's actions. The blood brew grapevine's roots wrapped around Red Thorn's Eye of Relinquish and tightened its grip. The tip of the roots poked at the Eye of Relinquish. Lin Yuan was a little surprised. He didn't expect the Eye of Relinquish skin to be so tough. Or perhaps the blood brew grapevine's roots were just too weak. Lin Yuan simply let the source sand produce a feather made of day and night spirit silver. He took the feather made of day and night spirit silver and gently cut a gap on the Eye of Relinquish. Subsequently, a few blood brew grapevine's roots drilled into the hole that Lin Yuan had just made. Immediately after, Lin Yuan noticed blood-colored energy ripples around the blood brew grapevine's body. On the shelf that the old man had set up for the blood brew grapevine, new and tender vines suddenly began to grow out. The sticky red juice that dripped from the hole that the blood brew grapevine had made was also slowly drying up. Lin Yuan reached out to touch it, and the thick layer of red sap on the outside peeled off. The wound on the hole had already become very small. The blood brew grapevine's absorption of the Eye of Relinquish's flesh energy was still very fast. In just 20 minutes, the blood brew grapevine had completely absorbed the Eye of Relinquish's flesh energy. Lin Yuan realized that the blood brew grapevine's absorption of the Eye of Relinquish's flesh energy was actually about the same as Red Thorn's condensation of the Eye of Relinquish. Lin Yuan took out the remaining 29 Eyes of Relinquish and placed them beside the blood brew grapevine's roots. Lin Yuan then used the feather made of day and night spirit silver to gently make a small hole on each Eye of Relinquish. This small hole was not enough for the Eye of Relinquish's flesh energy to spill out. However, it could allow the blood brew grapevine's roots to break through the Eye of Relinquish's surface. Third update. Reward for cynical love, more. End of this chapter. Chapter 482. After releasing the blood brew grapevine, Lin Yuan realized that the blood brew grapevine was quite greedy. Originally, the blood brew grapevine didn't have that many roots, so it couldn't be used. However, in order to occupy all the Eyes of Relinquish, the blood brew grapevine had actually grown many young roots. After the young roots grew out, they entered every Eye of Relinquish together with the old roots. After ensuring that all the Eyes of Relinquish were occupied, the blood brew grapevine started to wantonly absorb the flesh energy of the Eyes of Relinquish. Moreover, he realized that the blood brew grapevine had its own tricks during this process. The tip of the blood brew grapevine's newly grown roots were much sharper than the older ones, and had a layer of sharp, woodified keratin. With these new young roots, the blood brew grapevine would no longer need Lin Yuan's help. Instead, he could rely on himself to break through the Eye of Relinquish's defenses. The boundless energy from the 29 Eyes of Relinquish was slowly absorbed into the blood brew grapevine's body. The blood brew grapevine began to sprout new branches from its vines. The blood brew grapevine was now twice as lush as it had been before, with a large number of young branches sprouting out of it. Lin Yuan did not care about this. The old man who had sold the blood brew grapevine must have trimmed all the branches and leaves of the blood brew grapevine. Only one main vine was left, ensuring that all the blood energy absorbed by the blood brew grapevine would be supplied to the bunch of blood brew grapes on the main vine. Compared to using this method to cultivate the blood brew grapevine to obtain the blood brew grapes, the blood brew grapevine was much stronger. Instead, Lin Yuan hoped that the blood brew grapevine would grow more vines and bear more blood brew grapes. Although this would undoubtedly increase the time it took for the blood brew grapevine to produce more blood brew grapes, the blood brew grapevine was still able to produce more blood brew grapes. However, not pruning the blood brew grapevine's branches would ensure that the blood brew grapevine wouldn't lose any energy. After all, the blood brew grapevine had absorbed a large amount of blood qi in order to grow these branches. If the Mother of Bloodbath wanted to advance to Myth 3, it would need to eat countless blood brew grapes. Allowing the blood brew grapevines to produce blood brew grapes on such a large scale would allow the Mother of Bloodbath to eat to its heart's content every time the blood brew grapes were harvested. After observing for a while and finding that there were no problems, he stored Red Thorn and the blood brew grapevine in the leaf-shaped diamond face storage box. Lin Yuan had wanted to use the Eye of Relinquish to test the blood brew grapevine, so he had not let Red Thorn keep the Eye of Relinquish. However, Lin Yuan was going to use Red Thorn's Eye of Relinquish to nurture the blood brew grapevine. He still had to maintain the Eye of Relinquish on Red Thorn at the maximum value of 60. The extra Eyes of Relinquish were immediately placed by Red Thorn at the roots of the blood brew grapevine through the nibbling vines. He would nurture the blood brew grapevine. Although Lin Yuan's main Fey was the Gold Eye/Fantasy Eye Source Sand, the Silver Eye/Fantasy Eye Red Thorn's compatibility focused on targeting groups, and it could only be of great use under certain circumstances. However, he was still used to maintaining his combat power at the maximum. He had to be in his best condition to face any possible unexpected situation. Even if he had experts like the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer protecting him, as well as the extreme token that the Moon Empress had given him, he would not be able to defeat them. However, Lin Yuan still felt that he should be in awe. The blood brew grapevine was able to absorb Red Thorn's Eye of Relinquish, and it was growing at a faster rate. Lin Yuan was finally relieved. He had to admit that he had saved a huge sum of money. The Eyes of Relinquish that Red Thorn had produced came from the Water World Dimensional Lifeforms flesh. The Water World Dimensional Lifeforms were huge, and the price of each flesh was exceptionally cheap. Could be said that they were the cheapest flesh material in this world. Red Thorn only relied on these Gold Water World Dimensional Lifeforms flesh to save Lin Yuan the trouble of collecting Fey's essence blood. Lin Yuan had been worried about the Gold Water World Dimensional Lifeforms flesh, but he had found a way to buy them on the way to the Indigo Azure Sea Market. The active period of the Dimensional Rift was about to arrive, and it could be said that he had an inexhaustible supply of Water World Dimensional Lifeforms flesh to trade with the Indigo Azure Guards. Lin Yuan planned to immediately make a deal with the middle-aged man from the Indigo Azure Guard after returning to the royal capital. It would be best to get a Diamond Fey storage box's Gold Water World Dimensional Lifeforms flesh as a backup. Lin Yuan suddenly thought that if the Mother of Bloodbath knew that its blood brew grapes were processed from the Gold Water World Dimensional Lifeforms flesh when it ate them, it would probably feel nauseous. However, Lin Yuan felt that the raw materials were not important. What was important was that the blood brew grapes were crystal clear, juicy and full. They contained the blood energy that the Mother of Bloodbath needed the most. It was just like how Jinkle was a good partner for crops. Lin Yuan, who had been busy with other things, could finally get busy with his own matters. He took out the strategic grade mountain-containing embryo that he had previously traded from the amber button-shaped Diamond Fey storage box. Lin Yuan looked at this mountain-containing embryo that was beating like an embryo. The more he looked, the more he felt that it looked like a potato. However, when he held it in his hand, the aura it emitted as it pulsed had a kind of virtuous bearing feeling. It was as if this small earth-yellow spherical object could lift 10,000 mountains. Or it could be said that the mountain-containing embryo gave Lin Yuan the feeling of a mountain itself. Lin Yuan let the amber button-shaped source sand on his cuff turn into a handful of gravel and wrapped it around the pulsing mountain-containing embryo. Lin Yuan could feel that the source sand's consciousness, which was not considered intelligent, transmitted an abnormal feeling of joy. It was obvious that the source sand could feel the mountain-containing embryo's benefits to itself. The mountain-containing embryo had the willpower of a mountain range that was constantly changing. Therefore, Lin Yuan let the source sand absorb the mountain-containing embryo. At the same time, he let the source sand's exclusive skill Metal Consume Manifestation devour the day and night spirit silver and memorize the divine travel black swallow's feather shape. It turned into the gold-edged feather shape that grew when Gray transformed into the heaven and earth Fae, the sky-clouded crane. The gold-edged feather shape was far more complicated than the divine travel black swallow's feather shape. Therefore, it would take a period of time to complete the memory and all the changes. At the same time, the source sand also needed a period of time to consume and absorb the mountain-containing embryo's evolving ability. Therefore, Lin Yuan put away the source sand, which was wrapping and absorbing the mountain-containing embryo. Fourth update. Tipping and adding updates. End of this chapter. Chapter 483. It was just that the source sand, which was absorbing the mountain-containing embryo, had turned into an amber button. It was as though a potato was sealed in the amber button, which originally had a yellow sand world inside. Lin Yuan could not help but sigh. Could this be the legendary rustic nobility? Now that it was almost time, Lin Yuan exited the spirit-lock spatial zone and returned to his tent. When he appeared in the tent, he could already faintly smell the seafood porridge coming from outside. Big brother Lu must have already started making breakfast. Lin Yuan stretched and walked out of the tent. As soon as he left the tent, he found that the mother of bloodbath had actually woken up early and was beside the big pot of seafood porridge that Lu Jie had lit. From time to time, it would add some peeled fresh prawns, scallops and abalone diced into the seafood porridge. The mother of bloodbath added again and again, unable to stop. The more the mother of bloodbath added, the faster Lu Jie's eyelids twitched. When the mother of bloodbath was about to add some fried fish diced, Lu Jie hurriedly stopped it. If you add more abalone diced, this pot of porridge will be too thick. After hearing Lu Jie's words, the mother of bloodbath stopped adding the abalone diced into the pot. Instead it asked, "This is my first time cooking. What if Lin Yuan and Listen find it unpalatable if I add too little?" Lu Jie took out a crystal bottle of salt powder and handed it to the mother of bloodbath. "These seafood are all bought in the morning, and you also added some platinum 9-ring star abalone liver juice. It won't taste bad. Just add some salt to bring out the freshness of the porridge to the greatest extent. Open the lid of this crystal bottle and turn it 4 times. The amount of salt should be enough." Lin Yuan raised his brows. This morning's breakfast was cooked by the mother of bloodbath. However, Lu Jie's meticulous guidance was so detailed that he even told Lin Yuan how much salt to add. Rather than saying that the mother of bloodbath was cooking, it was better to say that Lu Jie the chef was cooking with his mouth. The mother of bloodbath, the cook, was helping the chef at the side. The sun shone brightly on the sea, and there were fine waves rolling along the blue sea's edge. However, there was not the slightest bit of vitality under the rising water. This coastal sea had been completely drained of energy by the sea burial lotus flower, and it was completely barren. It might not recover in 100 years. Without phase frequenting this sea region, as long as there were no water world dimensional rifts, there would not be any danger. It was a good place for a vacation. Lin Yuan and the others were enjoying the rich ingredients, especially the mother of bloodbath's delicious seafood porridge with platinum 9-ring star abalone liver juice. On the other side, the Jing family was not calm. A middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face was pushing a wheelchair on a small path in the courtyard. The chill of the cold night in the morning had yet to dissipate, causing the skinny young man who was sitting on the wheelchair to be covered with a thick blanket. He also had a white fur coat draped over him. The middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face bowed when he saw the skinny young man wrapped himself in a fur coat. "Third young master, we've been out for more than twice as long as usual. Why don't we go back after we finish this path?" The skinny young man who was sitting on the wheelchair was obviously in a good mood. "There's no hurry. After we finish this path, bring me to the plum forest at the back to take a look. It hasn't snowed in Indigo Azure City for a long time. Without the white snow as a contrast, the red plum blossoms don't look as stunning. Instead, the usually unremarkable white plum blossoms have a special flavor when you look at them." The man with 3 scars on his face heard this and knew that the third young master's mood could not be described as ordinary good. The middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face obviously knew why the third young master was in such a good mood. "Third young master, there was a heavy snowfall on the sea last night, but it stopped after a short while." The skinny young man who was addressed as the third young master chuckled. "The snow stopped at the sea, but since it started elsewhere, how could it stop so easily? It's a pity that my legs are inconvenient, so I couldn't enjoy the show at the sea last night." The skinny young man suddenly asked, "Uncle Fu, even Nightmare 6 disappeared. Uncle Fu, even Nightmare 6 has disappeared. Can second brother still sit still?" The middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face looked at the third young master's current state and didn't say anything. That was because the middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face knew that the third young master was immersed in his own world and had entered a state of soliloquy. Disturbing him at this time would result in serious trouble. Sure enough, the middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face heard the third young master suddenly sigh. "Sigh, second brother's legs aren't broken yet, so he naturally won't be able to sit still like me. But if second brother's legs are really broken, he won't be able to sit still even if he wants to." The middle-aged man who thought that the weather was sunny and warm suddenly felt the wind turn cold for some reason. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared out of thin air beside the skinny young man's wheelchair. He was dressed in a black robe, but his figure was much taller than ordinary people. It made the black robe look a little bulky. After the black figure appeared, he tilted his head and whispered in the skinny young man's ear. "Third young master, the news has been confirmed. Nightmare 6 is dead. In addition, I have already delivered the things that you asked me to deliver." The skinny young man sat in the wheelchair and stretched in satisfaction. His fingers tapped on the wheelchair's armrest and he was obviously in a better mood than before. Lin Yuan had just come out of the sea and checked the ethereal jellyfish's speed of collecting floating silver strands. He found that the ethereal jellyfish's speed of collecting floating silver strands was much faster than expected. It had only been a night, and it had already collected about 1/3 of the floating silver strands. Therefore, by this time tomorrow, all the floating silver strands should be collected. Of course, Zhou Luo's contracted lava dragon lizard contributed a lot. After staying at sea for a day, Lin Yuan felt that spirit chi professionals were really very particular about the choice of contracted phase. Sea, land, and sky were the 3 domains. Most phase could only occupy one of them. It was rare for phase to occupy 2 or even a combination of 3. In different environments, different phase would be able to exhibit different strengths. For example, no matter how strong Lu Jie's insect queen's insect swarm was, it could only deal with the enemies at sea. Lu Jie could only rely on the lightning-gathering moths and hurricane owlet moths to attack the surface. As for the enemies under the sea, Lu Jie could only do nothing. Lin Yuan felt that if there was a chance in the future, apart from Red Thorn's source-type life form that could fight in the water, he should also contract a real aquatic fae. He should also form a contract with a true aquatic fae. Reward and update for otaku. Tipping more for otaku. Hee. Everyone is welcome to join the group to chat and discuss the plot. Everyone is welcome to join the group to chat and discuss the plot. Also, there will be a reward for guessing the name of Lin Yuan's first sacred source life form. If you answer correctly, you will enter the group and receive an item from Lin Yuan's Spirit Lock Spatial Zone. Seeking recommendation tickets, monthly tickets, rewards, and subscriptions. End of this chapter. Chapter 484. At that moment, Lin Yuan's phone suddenly rang. Upon seeing the caller, Lin Yuan could not help but feel a little surprised. After picking up the phone, Lin Yuan heard the other party speak first before he could speak. "I said that I can use any dimensional life form's flesh to exchange for water world dimensional life form's flesh. I shouldn't be able to do so in the future." The voice from the other end of the phone was very forthright with a hint of apology. Lin Yuan subconsciously replied, "It doesn't matter if you can't use any dimensional life form's flesh. It's fine if you can't use the flesh of any dimensional creatures. I have a lot of abyss dimensional creatures' flesh here." The middle-aged man on the other end of the line understood that Lin Yuan had misunderstood and quickly replied, "We use the flesh of water world dimensional creatures to exchange for the flesh of demon dimensional creatures. But that's because it's easier to sell the demon dimensional creature's flesh into spirit materials. Now, our boss has found a way to exchange the water world dimensional life form's flesh for some basic supplies. So I'll have to break the exchange conditions I promised you before." Lin Yuan's brows immediately twitched wildly. He had finally found a way to exchange for water world dimensional life form's flesh, so he could not just break it like this. Not to mention letting Red Thorn evolve the ability to breathe underwater. Just the mouth of Relinquish could operate at full strength and produce the eyes of Relinquish to nurture the blood brew grapevine. It needed to consume the flesh of hundreds of gold water world dimensional life forms every day. Those that had been exchanged previously were only enough for Red Thorn's mouth of Relinquish to operate at full strength for about a month. As Red Thorn became stronger, it would be matched with the acid secreted by the tongue of Relinquish that specialized in digesting water world dimensional life forms. Lin Yuan's demand for the gold water world dimensional life form's flesh was on a higher level. If the water world dimensional life form's flesh was gone, how could Lin Yuan bear it? Since the middle-aged man on the other end of the conversation was an Indigo Azure Guard, then the leader he mentioned must be the Indigo Azure Guard captain. Lin Yuan wondered if it was the one who had come to the deserted island with the 2 guard envoys yesterday. Since the Indigo Azure Guard captain wanted to exchange for basic supplies, Lin Yuan could also take out basic supplies. In fact, in addition to basic supplies, it was to be able to exchange for gold water world dimensional life form's flesh. Even if Lin Yuan had to take out some relatively precious supplies, he would be willing. As long as he could keep using the water world dimensional life form's flesh for consumption, it would be equivalent to doing the most economical thing. Uncle, I can take out more than just basic supplies. I can also take out high-quality materials and some rare spiritual materials to exchange for the flesh and blood of the water world dimensional life forms. As he spoke, he had some doubts. He needed the water world dimensional life form's flesh to be used as rations for Red Thorn. Why would others need something as smelly as the flesh of water world dimensional creatures? While Lin Yuan was puzzled, he didn't know that the middle-aged man on the other end of the line was even more puzzled. What was wrong with this world? There were actually people willing to take out high-quality resources and rare spiritual materials to exchange for the flesh of gold water world dimensional life forms. The rich really knew how to play. One had to know that their boss had found a channel to exchange the flesh and blood of dimensional creatures from the water world for basic supplies. To the Indigo Azure Guards, it was like celebrating the new year. One had to know that the Indigo Azure Guards would usually throw away countless pieces of water world dimensional creature flesh every year. The middle-aged man didn't feel that it was a waste to discard the water world dimensional creature's flesh and blood, but now that he thought about it, his heart ached. Lin Yuan soon heard the middle-aged man on the other end of the phone say straightforwardly, "But if you want to reach a long-term cooperation, you can't buy as little as before. But if you want to reach a long-term cooperation, you can't buy as little as before." Why did he suddenly feel like he was holding a precious bargaining chip now that he was holding the water world dimensional life form's flesh and could start negotiating conditions? Now that I'm holding the flesh and blood of the water world dimensional creature, why do I suddenly feel like I'm holding a precious bargaining chip? I can begin negotiating conditions? In the future, every time I make an exchange, I'll use a diamond phase storage box as a unit. As for the price, we'll still follow the previous price, but I'll convert the price of the demon flesh according to the selling price on StarWeb. The converted price of high-quality materials and rare spiritual materials will also be based on StarWeb's price. Uncle, do you think it's okay? Based on the middle-aged man's words, the reason he had cancelled the previous transaction agreement was because of the price of the demon flesh and blood. The converted price of high-quality materials and rare spiritual materials will also be based on StarWeb's price. What do you think, Uncle? The main reason he had cancelled the previous transaction agreement was the loss of value after exchanging the demon flesh and blood with the water world dimensional life forms. In addition to the loss of value, it would also take a lot of time to disassemble the demon flesh and blood in the abyss dimensional life forms. Now he was willing to use high-quality materials and rare spiritual materials to exchange. It was equivalent to helping the middle-aged man offset the price difference in the middle, which he should be willing to do. In Lin Yuan's opinion, converting everything according to the StarWeb price was a more cost-effective price for the middle-aged man. After all, the price of demon flesh and blood on StarWeb was about 10% to 20% more expensive than its actual value. Sure enough, after Lin Yuan finished speaking, he immediately heard the middle-aged man's hearty laughter. Young brother is very particular. Lin Yuan could not help but feel embarrassed when he heard how the middle-aged man addressed him. Previously he had been calling him uncle, but now that the middle-aged man called him young brother, Lin Yuan could no longer call him uncle. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard the middle-aged man speak again. Young brother, the active period of the dimensional rift is about to begin and will last for nearly half a year. Therefore, I can't provide any more transactions during this period. The next time I can provide a transaction should be half a year later. If you need a lot of water world dimensional life forms, flesh and blood, it's best to complete the transaction with me before tomorrow. Otherwise, our boss may clear out all the dimensional life forms, flesh and blood in exchange for some ordinary materials that can improve the phase diet. Lin Yuan immediately expressed his agreement after hearing the middle-aged man's words. Then I might as well go to Indigo Azure City to find you now. It just so happens that I have an empty diamond phase storage box here. I can fill it up during the transaction. After agreeing on a location with the middle-aged man, Lin Yuan hung up the phone. At that moment, a rather serious voice suddenly came from behind the middle-aged man, whose face was smiling like an old chrysanthemum. Kid, why are you smiling so wretchedly? I've been listening to you laughing for a minute at the door. Why? Have you found a girlfriend since you were single? Chapter 6. More tips for otaku. End of this chapter. Chapter 485. When the middle-aged man heard that, his face immediately wrinkled. Guard Captain, shouldn't you assign me a girlfriend since I'm so hardworking? The Indigo Azure Guard Captain was the man in blue armor that Lin Yuan had seen on the deserted island that day. When the Indigo Azure Guard Captain heard the middle-aged man's words, he immediately slapped his shoulder and scolded jokingly. Little brat, I've been single for 5 more years than your mother did and I'm still single. You still want me to assign you a wife? Hurry up. Kid, don't talk nonsense. Come with me to sell all the water world dimensional life forms flesh we've stored. When the middle-aged man heard that, he reached out to grab his buzz cut and said with a sneaky smile, Guard Captain, I seem to have negotiated a big deal. Guard Captain, I seem to have negotiated a huge deal. Half of the gold water world dimensional creature's flesh can't be used to exchange for ordinary supplies. When the Indigo Azure Guard Captain heard that, he went up and gave the middle-aged man a kick. If you have something to say it quickly. I've been busy these 2 days and haven't had any sleep at all. I'm not in the mood to see you show off. After being kicked, the middle-aged man hurriedly told the Indigo Azure Guard Captain about the deal he had just made with Lin Yuan on the phone. The Indigo Azure Guard Captain frowned slightly. It was not that such a deal was bad, but it was too good. It was so good that it was somewhat unreal. If this deal could be reached, then they could exchange for basic supplies. The Indigo Azure Guard would be exchanging all the water world dimensional life forms flesh for a large number of basic supplies, premium supplies, and rare spiritual ingredients before the dimensional rift arrived. However, such a good deal had to be properly investigated before the transaction. The Indigo Azure Guard Captain had originally come to find the middle-aged man to trade the water world dimensional life forms flesh. Now that there was an additional buyer, it was just on the way. If there were rare spiritual ingredients and premium supplies to be exchanged, as long as one was not a fool, they would naturally exchange with rare spiritual ingredients and premium supplies first. How much of the gold water world dimensional life forms flesh does he want? When the middle-aged man heard that, he immediately answered with a grin. He said he wants to exchange for a diamond phase storage box. When the Indigo Azure Guard Captain heard that, he became even more surprised and could not help but fall into deep thought. When he came back to his senses and saw that the middle-aged man was still standing there, he immediately coughed and said, Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and get ready. In addition to the agreed gold water world dimensional life form flesh in the diamond phase storage box, prepare some more. The middle-aged man immediately responded, then hurriedly went to prepare. At this moment, the Indigo Azure Guard Captain was secretly planning to take a good look when the time came. What kind of exquisite resources and rare spiritual ingredients would the other party use to exchange for the gold water world dimensional life forms flesh in the diamond phase storage box? There were far too many fine materials and rare spirit materials. Some items that were in high demand would be snatched up crazily as soon as they appeared. However, if he encountered something that had a price but no supply, it would be the same as piling it up in his hands. If that was the case, it would be better to exchange for daily necessities. After hanging up, he told everyone that he was going to Indigo Azure City to trade. Upon hearing that, Endless Summer let the Mother of Bloodbath continue to split the spiritual ingredients on Nightmare VI's body. Endless Summer turned into an abnormally exquisite pink-purple hydrangea-shaped flower and landed on the completely jade-textured rice bead at the hem of Lin Yuan's white spirit chi clothes. It made Lin Yuan's moon-white spirit chi clothes more vibrant and vivid. Obviously, Endless Summer planned to accompany Lin Yuan to Indigo Azure City at this time to deal with the Zheng family's possible revenge. Lin Yuan also understood Endless Summer's intention. However, in Lin Yuan's opinion, the Zheng family probably had no intention of revenge at this time. Even as a veteran faction, the Zheng family's loss of 2 Emperor-class experts was enough to be considered a serious blow. In addition, the 2 Spirit Guards envoys had also come to Indigo Azure City, and the Zheng family had just lost manpower. At this time he would have to guard against Indigo Azure City and the other 2 veteran forces of the Zheng family and the other 3 families, who would kick him when he was down. The loss of 2 Emperor-class experts might not be enough to destroy the original situation of the 3 factions. However, it would make the Zheng family the weaker party. This time, the Mother of Bloodbath did not fight with Endless Summer for the opportunity to go to Indigo Azure City with Lin Yuan. Although the Mother of Bloodbath was Lin Yuan's path protector in terms of strength, The current endless summer was indeed stronger. The mother of bloodbath had been injured before, but it didn't look like it was injured on the surface. Although outsiders could not see the injury on the surface, it still needed some time to recuperate. During the day, Lu Jie Listen and Zhou Luo had already gone to the sea to help the ethereal jellyfish collect floating silver threads. The ethereal jellyfish had found the floating silver threads. However, the ethereal jellyfish was unable to use its tentacles to gather and store the floating silver silk thread. Under Zhou Luo's dumbfounded gaze, Lu Jie and Listen began a new round of written tests. However, Zhou Luo did not understand why someone would use something so bitter as a bet. Would eating the platinum bitter gourd's flesh really not kill me? Lin Yuan thought about Indigo Azure City along the way. When he arrived at the agreed restaurant, Lin Yuan realized that the middle-aged man he had agreed to meet had not arrived yet. He sat at the side and looked at the scenery in the store. The store's business was very good. It was only morning, but there were already many customers ordering iced drinks, fruit plates and baked cookies. Lin Yuan only ordered a cup of freshly squeezed watermelon juice and waited for the middle-aged man to arrive. He started to organize the pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box that he had obtained from Jian Hanzhong. The leaf-shaped diamond face storage box originally had plenty of high-grade dimensional lifeforms flesh and some phase that he had harvested from the depths of the endless forest. Therefore, Lin Yuan planned to empty Jian Hanzhong's pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box. It was used to store the gold water world dimensional lifeforms flesh in the diamond face storage box. Lin Yuan had not checked Jian Hanzhong's pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box before. Now that he checked, Lin Yuan realized that Jian Hanzhong had not hoarded many resources. Most of the resources must have been spent on the cold snow pine. However, Lin Yuan quickly realized that he had thought wrong. Jian Hanzhong was really an elegant person. The diamond face storage box had always been used to store resources, but Jian Hanzhong had forcefully created the feeling of Morbius Spirit Lock Spatial Zone. It did not have the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone's function. However, within the range of the diamond face storage box, Jian Hanzhong had made it look like a small garden. 7th update. Tipping and updating for the house. End of this chapter. Chapter 486. There were hundreds of rare plants that had obviously been carefully pruned. Their branches and leaves were trimmed, and they were cultivated with great care. Lin Yuan used Morbius True Data to check and found that many of the plants were very rare. However, most of them did not have any special functions. They were all supreme-grade plants that relied on their looks to make a living. Among them, 12 platinum vines green goat roses had already produced flower buds. The blue goat rose was a famous species of roses. A platinum/epic blue goat rose like this could be sold for nearly 10 million radiance dollars. As long as there was a wall, it did not matter how high it was. The Qingyang rose could grow along the wall and spread out on one side of the wall, forming a beautiful flower wall. The bowl-sized green double-petaled flowers could emit a fragrance that repelled mosquitoes and flies but could attract butterflies. Jiao Hanzhong had really put in a lot of effort to collect these plants. Supreme-grade plants were not things that could be bought with money. With so many of them gathered here, it would be impossible to collect them without a few decades. In the return from faraway manor, Hu Quan, who had become a Class 5 spirit craftsman, had already started to find a team of architects to start building the Dome Guild Club's base. The supreme-grade plants in Jiao Hanzhong's diamond face storage box could be used to decorate the Guild Club's base. At the same time, he could also build a small garden outside the 3,000-meter bamboo forest in the manor. He could then cultivate all of these supreme-grade plants in the garden. Lin Yuan continued to check the resources in Jiao Hanzhong's diamond face storage box and found that Jiao Hanzhong had stored a total of 50 source-type items in one box. This should be what Jiao Hanzhong had left after nurturing the cold snow pine and so many other supreme-grade plants. Then Lin Yuan collected some spiritual ingredients that he felt were valuable and could not easily buy in the market. Lin Yuan planned to use the remaining resources in Jiao Hanzhong's diamond face storage box to exchange for the gold water world dimensional lifeforms flesh. Lin Yuan only had time to drink the iced watermelon juice after tidying up Jiao Hanzhong's diamond face storage box. Just as he drank a few mouthfuls of the iced watermelon juice, Lin Yuan saw the middle-aged man he had arranged to meet walking toward him. The middle-aged man had obviously noticed Lin Yuan's presence and was waving at him. Lin Yuan hurriedly got up and waved at the middle-aged man. After standing up, Lin Yuan realized that the middle-aged man was accompanied by someone he had seen before. It was the Indigo Azure Guard captain who had gone to the deserted island. Lin Yuan also waved at the Indigo Azure Guard captain. The Indigo Azure Guard captain was rather surprised to see Lin Yuan. He did not expect that this youth who seemed to know the two guard envoys, but did not seem to know them, was actually the target of this transaction. Lin Yuan handed the pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box to the middle-aged man sitting opposite him who had just ordered the peanuts and ice flowers. Take a look at the things inside. Can you exchange them for a diamond face storage box and a gold water world dimensional life forms flesh? Lin Yuan had already sorted out the resources here. In addition to the ones he had taken out, he had replenished 200 pots of silver/elite usnias after realizing that they were not enough. Lin Yuan had carefully calculated the value and it would only be more or less. Of course, even if it was more, it would only be a little bit more. After the middle-aged man took a look, the peanuts and ice flowers that the waiter had just served fell out of his mouth. The Indigo Azure Guard captain frowned. This kid had a slip of the tongue and even wanted me to introduce a partner. Isn't this a scam? Immediately after, the middle-aged man handed the pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box to the Indigo Azure Guard captain. The Indigo Azure Guard captain picked it up and felt that it was fortunate that he had not eaten the ice flowers. Otherwise, even if it did not fall out of his mouth, he would definitely choke. After carefully looking through it, the Indigo Azure Guard captain knew that the resources inside were definitely enough. Moreover, there were silver usnias which could produce silver usnia vines continuously. It was definitely worth the money. Although there were also some items that were relatively difficult to sell. As long as silver usnias appeared in the market, they would be immediately snatched up by people. Hence, they were calculated according to the star web price. This was enough to show the sincerity of the youth wearing the strange mask. The Indigo Azure Guard captain simply asked the middle-aged man to fill the pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box. Then he took out the extra platinum face storage box and the gold dimensional lifeforms flesh and handed it to Lin Yuan. He said, "I hope we can have a pleasant cooperation again in the future." Lin Yuan did not reject the extra platinum water world dimensional lifeforms flesh. Just like how the middle-aged man and the Indigo Azure Guard captain did not reject Lin Yuan's additional premium resources and rare spiritual ingredients. After this transaction, Lin Yuan was finally at ease. He would no longer need to worry about the water world dimensional lifeforms flesh. At the same time, it was equivalent to Lin Yuan saving a large sum of money that even he would feel the pinch of spending. Along the way there were no accidents. Lin Yuan and Endless Summer once again returned to the deserted island. The Mother of Bloodbath had more or less split the dream-eating bat. When the Mother of Bloodbath saw Lin Yuan return, it handed over all the resources it had split from the cold snow pine and the dream-eating bat. "Look at my skills. Isn't it a lot better than when I split that old crow?" Lin Yuan looked at the various spiritual ingredients that had been dissected so carefully and stored in crystal bottles according to their categories. He quickly gave the Mother of Bloodbath a thumbs up. The Mother of Bloodbath could be called the Butcher's Splitting Hand, Ruthless Bone Crusher, and Tidying Up Little Expert. The Mother of Bloodbath accepted Lin Yuan's compliment with confidence. It stretched and took out its cell phone, waved it in front of Lin Yuan and said, "My cell phone is out of battery. My phone is out of battery, lend me your phone. I want to share the Teppan seafood barbecue that I posted in my moments with the members of the food group." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan's brows twitched wildly as he handed over his cell phone. As the Mother of Bloodbath continued to share Lu Jie's delicacies in the few food group exchanges, the Mother of Bloodbath had been in. It had become the mysterious chef worshipper fellowship. However, only those who had tasted Lu Jie's delicacies would understand the bliss of being able to taste Lu Jie's delicacies. Ever since Lu Jie's cooking had made him a picky eater, Lin Yuan no longer had that amazing feeling even when he went to the Spirit Food Pavilion to eat. In fact, Lin Yuan even felt that Lu Jie's cooking was more delicious. 8th update. Tipping for otaku. There were some problems with the settings of the elemental shellfish. Ooh. I'm going to change it tonight. Thank you for pointing it out to me. Let's start with the 8th update today and make up for the rest. Button will continue to work hard. End of this chapter. Chapter 487. After handing the cell phone to the mother of Bloodbath, Lin Yuan dived into the sea again. He saw Listen, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo each wearing a gold-green oxygen sea anemone on their mouths. They were constantly rolling the floating silver threads that the ethereal jellyfish had found on the seabed into a ball. Just as Lin Yuan was about to help, Zhou Luo handed him several bundles of floating silver threads and pointed at the sea surface. Lin Yuan understood and floated up with Zhou Luo. Zhou Luo handed the bundles of floating silver threads to Lin Yuan and said, "Young master, we have a total of 47 bundles now. Young master, we now have a total of 47 groups. Each group of floating silver threads is at least 1,000 meters long." Lin Yuan took the bundles of floating silver threads and could not help but sigh. Just these floating silver threads were already a considerable amount of wealth. Apart from being used to shield spatial fluctuations, the floating silver was also used to make fey carriages. A large portion of it would also be used to make fey carriages or mixed in the walls of buildings to shield from detection. These floating silver threads should be quite useful in Hu Quan's hands after he brought them back. Seeing Lin Yuan take the bundles of floating silver threads, Zhou Luo's expression was a little complicated. "Young master, go to the island. You don't have to go into the sea. The three of us can completely keep up with young master's spatial phase speed in finding the floating silver. I often have no work to do." Lin Yuan listened to Zhou Luo's words and looked at Zhou Luo's expression. He immediately wondered if Lu Jie and Listen had started some strange competition again. Since he could not help much in the sea, Lin Yuan simply returned to the island. He let Lu Jie's insect queen produce a hurricane owlet moth to blow dry his clothes before returning to the tent. He was prepared to enter the spirit lock spatial zone again to see the changes that had occurred after the source sand absorbed the mountain-containing embryo after such a long time. Zhou Luo watched Lin Yuan go ashore before diving into the sea again. The more he interacted with Lin Yuan, the more Zhou Luo could find that Lin Yuan was different from the other young masters of the major factions. Lin Yuan did not have that kind of domineering arrogance. Zhou Luo could clearly feel Lin Yuan's equal and intimate attitude toward him and others. When he returned to the Spirit Lock spatial zone again, he suddenly realized that there was a very fragrant scent in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. He was very familiar with this smell. This smell was very similar to the smell of the silver stamen gold luster cassia flowers at the entrance of the Radiant Moon Palace. It was just that the fragrance was a little stronger than the silver stamen gold luster cassia. At the same time, in this rich fragrance, there was a trace of bitterness that was hard to detect. When he had been enhancing Grey yesterday, he had discovered that the cinnabar sweet osmanthus, whose tree core had been dug out half a year ago, had vaguely grown flower buds that were not even the size of rice grains among the green leaves. However, Lin Yuan had been focused on Grey yesterday and had not paid attention to the changes in the cinnabar sweet osmanthus. When he thought about it carefully, he remembered that although the cinnabar sweet osmanthus had recovered from its injuries, it did not seem to have produced flower buds. But now, the cinnabar sweet osmanthus had actually bloomed a tree full of vermilion flowers that bent the branches. The flowers were so dense that they almost completely covered the green leaves. Looking from afar, the cinnabar sweet osmanthus would occasionally drop the most flourishing flowers. The flowers bloomed, but the flowers were already withered. The most flourishing flowers sprinkled on the pure white pure land of bliss. It was like a misty rain in April with a breathtaking and gentle beauty. Come to think of it, when the pure land of bliss had been absorbing the world grace yesterday, the cinnabar sweet osmanthus had also obtained a lot of benefits from the pure land of bliss. Since the cinnabar sweet osmanthus had obtained benefits from the pure land of bliss, what about the phoenix perching Chinese parasol tree? Immediately after, Lin Yuan took a closer look at the phoenix perching Chinese parasol tree beside the cinnabar sweet osmanthus and found that a new branch had grown from Chinese bird nest. Although the branch didn't make Chinese nest bigger, it made the nest look more luxuriant than it had expected. Lin Yuan could vaguely feel that the speed at which the phoenix perching Chinese parasol tree conducted the golden energy toward the bird nest seemed to be slightly faster than before. However, this increase was not very obvious if one did not observe it carefully. The wind speed rapid antelope, which Lin Yuan had appointed as the Spirit Lock spatial zone's housekeeper, was constantly manipulating the wind elements to form a cyclone. He diligently collected the cinnabar-colored flower petals that fell on the pure land of bliss. Upon sensing that Lin Yuan had entered the Spirit Lock spatial zone, the wind-speed rapid antelope quickly ran toward Lin Yuan. It hopped twice in front of Lin Yuan and was abnormally friendly. The wind-speed rapid antelope's feelings for Lin Yuan were different from the other phase that Lin Yuan had nurtured but not contracted. When the wind-speed rapid antelope was on the brink of death, it could only watch as Lin Yuan saved it like a god of salvation. And to live in such a nice place. Therefore, to a certain extent, the wind-speed rapid antelope's gratitude and closeness to Lin Yuan was already comparable to Chimey and Genius' closeness to Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan rubbed the wind-speed rapid antelope's little head. At that moment he looked at the 7 bronze/legend elemental shellfish that he had placed in different locations in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Apart from the ones that the floating island whale and the twin red pagoda had absorbed, the elemental pearls produced by the elemental shellfish had all disappeared. The wind-speed rapid antelope had neatly gathered them together. Upon seeing that, Lin Yuan walked over and took out a heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearl produced by the Celestine elemental shellfish and handed it to the wind-speed rapid antelope. Previously, Lin Yuan had never thought of nurturing the wind-speed rapid antelope, so he had never poured any resources into it. Now that Lin Yuan had decided to nurture the wind-speed rapid antelope, he would not be stingy even though its foundation was not good. The cinnabar sweet osmanthus's flowers were an excellent thing. The cinnabar sweet osmanthus's flowers could refresh the mind, clear toxins, and suppress mental toxins to a certain extent. It was not like the silver stamen gold luster osmanthus's flowers that could cleanse the marrow and make the human genetic model more perfect. However, the cinnabar sweet osmanthus's flowers had such effects, and it was also an excellent choice as an ingredient. Afterward, the maple syrup that everyone ate in the mansion could be replaced with the cinnabar sweet osmanthus's nectar. Lin Yuan could feel the wind-speed rapid antelope's thoughtfulness. The wind-speed rapid antelope was a fae that could manipulate elemental energy with spiritual mutation. It could naturally sense the pure and abundant wind elemental energy in the pearl that Lin Yuan had handed to it. The wind-speed rapid antelope carefully cupped Lin Yuan's hand, lowered its head and shook its neck. First update. Seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. There will be more tonight, but it will be later. End of this chapter. Chapter 488. The wind-speed rapid antelope's action seemed to be hinting for Lin Yuan to help it hang the wind elemental heavenly maiden-grade pearl around its neck. Lin Yuan smiled and crushed the wind elemental heavenly maiden-grade pearl, indicating for the wind-speed rapid antelope to eat it. The wind-speed rapid antelope's current intelligence was just like the clingy pets that people raised in his previous life. Even if you make some movements, he will be able to understand the meaning behind your movements. However, if he were to use language to communicate with the wind-speed rapid antelope, it wouldn't be able to understand. However, Lin Yuan still spoke softly to the wind-speed rapid antelope, just like how he spoke to Genius and Chimey. Little fella, with your body's current condition, you can consume an elemental pearl approximately every 3 days. From now on, I will feed you one every 3 days. The wind-speed rapid antelope saw that Lin Yuan had crushed the good stuff and handed it to it. She didn't understand why Lin Yuan was so wasteful to let her eat such a good thing. However, the wind-speed rapid antelope still happily licked all the elemental pearl powder in Lin Yuan's palm clean. Lin Yuan shook his head helplessly. Is this little fellow afraid of wasting the elemental pearl powder, or is it washing its hands for me? This was simply too clean. Since the wind-speed rapid antelope was innately weak, it did not receive proper nurturing when it was young. Therefore, he decided to rely on the acquired resources to push the wind-speed rapid antelope up. To the current Lin Yuan, priceless treasures were easy to obtain. However, the wind-speed rapid antelope was considerate and sensible. It relied on its instincts to tidy up the Spirit Lock spatial zone in an orderly manner. If he were to miss this opportunity, it would be difficult to find another one. Even if he could meet again, he would never be fated with this little fellow in front of him. With the pleasant surprise of the cinnabar sweet osmanthus blooming, Lin Yuan went closer to take a look at the cinnabar osmanthus haworthia parasitizing the cinnabar sweet osmanthus. With a glance, Lin Yuan realized that the cinnabar osmanthus haworthia had now become gold X from gold 8. A long thin tassel grew out of it. Upon seeing this fine tassel, Lin Yuan knew that it was a sign that the cinnabar osmanthus haworthia was about to bear fruit. Lin Yuan was looking forward to the cinnabar osmanthus haworthia bearing fruit. Once the cinnabar Osmanthus haworthia's fruit matured, it would strengthen his spiritual energy, which he had not dared to use easily. Although it was not much of an enhancement, it would allow him to choose a fae without having to be so strapped for spiritual energy. You can also have more choices. After arranging everything, Lin Yuan let the source sand at the cuff of his sleeve turn into the form of gravel. With this look, he found that the mountain-containing embryo was indeed smaller than before. However, the source sand's quality remained the same. It hadn't been upgraded from Fantasy I to Fantasy II. However, Lin Yuan could clearly sense that the source sand had undergone tremendous changes. Previously, if the source sand's gravel had been separated, it would only be the pile of gravel that the source sand had transformed into and the gravel that the source sand had produced by creating sand underground. But now, other than the ball of sand that the source sand had transformed into and the grains of sand that it had produced, the source sand didn't seem to be able to move at all. Lin Yuan felt that the source sand was now able to produce a type of extremely dense gravel. Although Lin Yuan's control over the high-density gravel was not as good as the source sand's own gravel, it was far superior to the source sand's mass production of gravel. Although there was not a lot of gravel, it could completely cover everything within 3 meters of Lin Yuan. This undoubtedly brought Lin Yuan a great surprise. The reason for such a change was because the source sand had absorbed the mountain-containing embryo's evolution ability. Lin Yuan planned to name the Midland dense gravel the guard gravel. Due to the gravel's existence, Lin Yuan's close-range defense and close-range attack abilities were greatly enhanced. At that moment, Lin Yuan truly felt how terrifying it was to nurture a fae with superior resources and how terrifying the fae's enhancement could be. Lin Yuan was also very glad that he hadn't made do with spiritual ingredients that could be substituted in order to improve his fantasy breed fae's quality. Lin Yuan took an Earth Elemental Heavenly Maiden Grade Elemental Pearl produced by the thick Earth Elemental Shellfish and threw it into the source sand. The source sand immediately transported this Earth Elemental Heavenly Maiden Grade Pearl to the side of the mountain-containing embryo. Then it rotated the gravel, causing the Earth Elemental Heavenly Maiden Grade Elemental Pearl and the mountain-containing embryo to collide. Lin Yuan suddenly felt that his elemental source-type source sand's soul essence wouldn't be that of an old man, right? When it was only a gold/fantasy breed, it already knew to rotate the pearl with its chaotic intelligence. What would happen when it matured? Lin Yuan had never given the source sand a name. Now he felt that since the source sand liked to rotate the pearl so much, why not call it source sand string? Lin Yuan wanted to use the Earth Elemental Heavenly Maiden Grade Elemental Pearls produced by the thick Earth Elemental Shellfish to temper the source sand's elemental body. The sand element was a variant of the earth element and they had the same origin. Since the source sand was an elemental source-type life form, it would be extremely beneficial for it to be tempered by such pure earth elements. Could also help the source sand increase its grade. After sensing the source sand's absorption speed, Lin Yuan knew that if this continued, the source sand would be able to consume 2 Earth Elemental Heavenly Maiden Grade Elemental Pearls every day. After accumulating for a long time, it would consume 60 pearls in a month and 720 pearls in a year. How many people could afford this kind of consumption? Even if they could afford it, how many people would be willing to invest so many resources for their faes? Nurturing a fae was a process of using resources to roll a snowball. Although the investment and return might not be proportional, it was impossible to make the fae stronger during the evolution process without any investment. It was obviously an extremely unrealistic thing. This was also the reason why a person with a stronger foundation would be able to nurture a stronger fae, excluding their own talents. However, Lin Yuan was very willing to spend the resources to nurture faes. Morbius was Lin Yuan's contracted fae, and its exclusive skill, Spirit Lock Spatial Zone, gave Lin Yuan the confidence to carry out such consumption. The number of Heavenly Maiden Grade Elemental Pearls consumed by the source sand was just a drop in the ocean compared to the number produced by the thick Earth Elemental Shellfish. Lin Yuan started to enhance the silver usnias in the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone. This Spirit Chi professional couldn't rely on absorbing the Spirit Chi in the world and could only rely on the Spirit Chi from the enhanced fae to increase their grade. It was simply too difficult. As soon as Lin Yuan exited the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone, he immediately sensed the ethereal jellyfish's spiritual wave. Lin Yuan's pupils constricted. Lin Yuan knew that the secret hidden in this nearshore sea could finally be completely revealed at this moment. Second update: seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 489. When Lin Yuan got out of the tent, he saw Listen sitting there with wet clothes and constantly stuffing dry rations into his mouth. Obviously, Listen had exhausted his stamina while collecting the floating silver threads under the sea. It seemed that the winner between Listen and Wuxia was clear at a glance. Lin Yuan walked to Listen's side, took out a bag of fresh fruits from the amber button-shaped diamond face storage box, handed it to Listen and he then asked, "What did you and Big Brother Lu bet on this time?" Upon hearing Lin Yuan's question, Listen answered with a bitter face. "It's the pulp of the platinum bitter melon. I originally only bet on this. But I added a condition of not drinking water for 3 hours after eating the bitter melon pulp." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan reached out and patted Listen's shoulder with a face full of sympathy. It was fine to eat the platinum bitter melon pulp, but it was just to experience the feeling of being so bitter that it made one want to die. If one drank a few cups of sweet fruit juice or nectar brewed from the cinnabar sweet osmanthus immediately after eating it, that extreme bitterness that made one want to die would be quickly eliminated. However, not drinking water for 3 hours after eating was too much. What kind of godly condition was this? What was the difference between this and a girlfriend asking to play for 3 days and 3 nights? That extreme bitterness did not need anything to be suppressed, and it simply could not be dispersed. Wasn't this the same as having to experience the feeling of being bitter for 3 hours in a row? Even if Lin Yuan had experienced the bitterness of life, he did not dare to imagine what it was like. Lin Yuan saw the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer each holding a mobile phone and fiddling with it. The two suzerain/myth breed phase had already displayed the realm of hands never leaving the mobile phone to the extreme. However, the mother of Bloodbath was using its mobile phone to share Lu Jie's food in the food group, attracting a group of praises. As for Endless Summer, people were frantically recommending all kinds of accessories in various accessories exchange groups. In this regard, Lin Yuan felt that it was simply great. As long as Endless Summer did not dye her hair, anything was good. When the mother of Bloodbath saw Lin Yuan leave the tent, its mouth twitched. Was there anyone more of a homebody than Lin Yuan in this world? It was not easy to come to the sea, but he did not come out to see the scenery and enjoy the sea breeze. All the people on Star Web were fat homebodies. However, the thin otaku drank less cola than the fat otaku. What was the difference between a skinny otaku and a fat otaku? The mother of Bloodbath stood up and was about to call Lin Yuan to move around on this deserted island and then go a little farther into the sea to catch some sea crabs. At that moment, the mother of Bloodbath saw Lin Yuan jump into the sea. Thus, the mother of Bloodbath could only sit down again and continue playing with her phone. But this time, the mother of Bloodbath did not chat in the gourmet group. Instead, he opened the search engine and searched. What's with the skinny otaku suddenly liking sports and taking the initiative to swim? The answer at the top of the list read frowny face. The skinny otaku must have gone underwater to look at the beauties. How dare someone ask such a stupid question? Eat some retarded pills to nourish yourself. Just as the mother of Bloodbath was about to get angry, it immediately thought of the words looking at beauties. Naturally, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo were not beauties. However, their appearances were also quite outstanding. If that's the case, what's with the skinny otaku going to the sea to look at handsome guys? The mother of Bloodbath suddenly felt that the human world was really difficult to understand. Male spiders were easier to understand. It was just that male spiders did not know how to cook. Pass. When Lin Yuan reached the sea, he saw Lu Jie standing on the seabed and constantly entangling the floating silver thread. Meanwhile, Zhou Luo was commanding the lava dragon lizard to constantly use its body to hit a seabed mound that was obviously several times harder than the other seabed rocks. When Lin Yuan got close, he saw that the lava dragon lizard's impact on the seabed mound was not obvious. He immediately summoned Red Thorn and let Red Thorn's Ortet spawn a large patch of nibbling vines under the sea. The nibbling vines started to nibble at the seabed mound through the sharp teeth on the vines. Half an hour later, the nibbling vines gnawed out many holes and the lava dragon lizard kept hitting it. The seabed that was holding down the last floating silver thread was directly broken by the impact. Just as Lu Jie pulled out the last floating silver thread, the space in the sea suddenly trembled violently. During the trembling, a huge hole tore open in the space. The huge hole sucked Lin Yuan, Lu Jie, Zhou Luo, as well as Red Thorn and the lava dragon lizard, which were close to Lin Yuan, into the open portal. Immediately after, this opened door lost the spatial magnetic ore's first layer of protection and the floating silver thread's second layer of concealment. After sucking Lin Yuan and the others in, it broke through the sea surface and formed a huge dimensional rift. Immediately after, something seemed to have happened inside the massive dimensional rift, causing it to tremble all of a sudden. A layer of violent spatial energy gushed out of the huge black and red rift. This layer of violent spatial energy seemed to be trying to pull, wanting to tear the already open dimensional rift's entrance even bigger. The moment the dimensional rift suddenly appeared and Lin Yuan and the others' auras disappeared, the Mother of Bloodbath flashed and arrived at the seabed where Lin Yuan, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo had disappeared. The Mother of Bloodbath saw the ethereal jellyfish using its soft tentacles to fiddle with the space. It wanted to drill into this dimensional rift that seemed to have a layer of restriction. However, the moment the ethereal jellyfish's soft tentacles touched the dimensional rift's restriction, they were sliced into pieces by the dimensional rift. However, the ethereal jellyfish did not seem to feel any pain and desperately tried to squeeze its body in. Upon seeing this, the Mother of Bloodbath stopped the ethereal jellyfish and immediately activated the blood law that it controlled. However, the condensed blood energy in its hand did not swing down on this dimensional rift that seemed to have a layer of restriction. Endless Summer said with an abnormally ugly expression. How can there be a controlled Pinnacle Class 3 Water World dimensional rift here? What happened inside the Water World dimensional rift's biological space is actually raising the dimensional rift's grade. The Mother of Bloodbath's usually expressionless face seemed to reveal a trace of panic and endless self-blame for the first time in its life. The Mother of Bloodbath hugged the ethereal jellyfish tightly in its arms. Its mind unconsciously thought of how that youth had gone all out under the earth cleansing. He had allowed it to pass through the myth 2 earth cleansing and transform into a human form. It was clearly Lin Yuan's path protector, but in a dangerous situation, it had lost the vigilance that a path protector should have. When it went out, it should always follow Lin Yuan closely and go into the sea with him. If it could go into the sea with Lin Yuan, then when this dimensional rift suddenly opened, it would be able to react immediately. Lin Yuan would also not be sucked into this dimensional rift. 166 Reading Network. Chapter 490. When a dimensional rift evolved, it was equivalent to sealing the original dimensional space and forming an independent spatial environment that was constantly tearing and expanding. Even if the Mother of Bloodbath used all its strength, it could not tear open the evolving dimensional rift. Even if someone had the ability to tear open this evolving dimensional rift, the Mother of Bloodbath would rush up and desperately stop that person. If the dimensional rift was torn open during the evolution process, the spatial energy inside the dimensional rift would be chaotic and collapse. At that time, Lin Yuan would be torn into pieces in the chaotic collapse of the spatial energy, and he was destined to have no chance of survival. The ethereal jellyfish that Lin Yuan had contracted was the only thing that could determine whether Lin Yuan was alive or not. The Mother of Bloodbath's self-reproach expression did not diminish, but it suppressed its panic. The Mother of Bloodbath soared into the air and returned to the deserted island. It took out the cell phone that it had previously asked Lin Yuan for. As a myth-breed fae, the Mother of Bloodbath's hand that was holding Lin Yuan's cell phone was trembling. The Mother of Bloodbath had clearly lived for a long time. However, the traces of life left behind in all the previous times were not as many as the traces left behind in this half a year. From the first time they met, scenes flashed in its mind. Never giving up. In the end, its entire life was integrated into the Return from Faraway Manor, which had long been treated by the Mother of Bloodbath as its home. Arachnid fays had always been cruel, but once a cruel and cold-blooded arachnid determined something, then it would often be more sincere. The Mother of Bloodbath forced itself to stop thinking. It lowered its head and looked at Lin Yuan's cell phone. The Mother of Bloodbath took a deep breath and dialed a number on Lin Yuan's cell phone. The Mother of Bloodbath understood that it could not do anything now. However, that person might have a way. Leaning Moon Mountain. Gulls and herons circled and butterflies fluttered. The silver stamen gold luster cassia emitted an elegant osmanthus fragrance that spread in front of the Radiant Moon Palace. Today the Radiant Moon Palace was a little different from usual. 4 attendants stood at the entrance of the Radiant Moon Palace. Their expressions were abnormally serious, but there was a trace of anticipation in their serious expressions. In the inner palace of the Radiant Moon Palace, Mystic Moon stood by the table, holding a jade pumpkin teapot. She looked at the moon shadow corridor inside the inner palace. At that moment, the pond full of suzerain lotus vase in the rear hall was emitting haze of various colors. This caused the inner palace to look like a fairyland shrouded in multicolored light. There were a few spirit siphon goldfish in the pool, which had been upgraded from platinum to diamond at some point in time. Their peony-like fishtails occasionally popped out of the water. Mystic Moon, Moon, and Mystic Moon. Xianyu's mind was clearly not on the jade pumpkin teapot in her hand. Thus, when Xianyu poured the tea out of the jade pumpkin teapot, she accidentally spilled some on the table. Xianyu hurriedly placed the jade pumpkin teapot on the table and picked up a handkerchief to clean up the spilled water stains. To Mystic too, the Mystic Moon's worried expression. Worry appeared in Mystic Moon. The worry in Xianyu's eyes deepened as she muttered softly. This is the third time the Moon Empress has attempted to break through that realm in the past few years. Not only did she fail the previous 2 times, but she was also severely injured. This is the third time the Moon Empress is trying to reach that realm in the past few years. At that moment, the Moon Empress cell phone rang. Mystic Moon did not check it immediately. The Moon Empress cell phone rarely rang, and it was mostly Lin Yuan. However, due to the Moon Empress' personal suggestion to change the Radiance 100 Sequences test, the Radiance 100 Sequences test had been changed recently. Therefore, the Radiance Sacred Hall had more opportunities to contact the Moon Empress. Mystic Moon was one of the Moon Empress Moon envoys. However, Mystic Moon would not pick up the Moon Empress call. If that was the case, it would be considered as overstepping his boundaries. However, after the ringing stopped, it rang 3 more times in a row. It seemed like there was something urgent. Mystic Moon took a look and found that it was Lin Yuan's cell phone number. Mystic Moon could not help but frown. These 3 consecutive calls were a little urgent. Could it be that Lin Yuan had encountered something urgent? The Moon Empress was in seclusion. If Lin Yuan really had something urgent, Mystic Moon could take care of it. Hence, Mystic Moon picked up the call. However, when Mystic Moon picked up the call, he heard a strange and pleasant female voice coming from the other end. It was not Lin Yuan's voice. However, after hearing the content, Mystic Moon's face turned gloomy. In an instant, a violent spiritual wave spiraled around Mystic Moon's body. Just as this terrifying spiritual pressure appeared, a layer of bright silver patterns appeared on Xianyu's forehead, cheeks, and even her palms, which were covered by the silver robe. At the same time, Mystic Moon's black eyes turned dark silver. Mystic Moon's usually gentle and clear voice was also tainted with a hint of worry and killing intent. Wait for me to inform the Moon Empress. After saying this, Mystic Moon looked at the moon shadow corridor in the inner palace. Gritting his teeth, Mystic Moon took the cell phone that he had not hung up and walked toward the moon shadow corridor. At that moment, the Moon Empress, who was in the moon shadow corridor's sleeping chamber, suddenly opened her eyes. The moment the Moon Empress opened her eyes, her aura changed drastically compared to before. Previously, the Moon Empress gave off the feeling of a bright moon in the sky that was illuminating the river. She had an unparalleled elegance as though she was born to be at the peak. Now, the Moon Empress' sharpness and nobility were all withdrawn the moment she opened her eyes. The bright moon in the sky that was illuminating the river quietly turned into a wisp of gentle moonlight. The corner of the Moon Empress' mouth revealed a smile. But immediately after, the Moon Empress' brows locked tightly. At that moment, the Moon Empress suddenly could not feel the existence of the extreme token that she had given Lin Yuan. At that moment, the Moon Empress heard Mystic Moon's voice coming from the door. Moon Empress, I have an important report that concerns His Highness. I have to disturb you. After hearing Mystic Moon's words, the Moon Empress immediately carried the rabbit that was nibbling on the carrot. In a flash, she left the sleeping chamber. When the Moon Empress appeared in front of Mystic Moon. When Mystic Moon sensed the Moon Empress state, he immediately knew that the Moon Empress had actually broken through that boundary. The Moon Empress was now in existence above an S+ spirit chi professional. However, Mystic Moon did not say a word of congratulations at that moment. Instead, he handed the cell phone that he had not hung up to the Moon Empress. When the Moon Empress picked up the phone, her originally cold face immediately turned expressionless and calm. Immediately after, countless experts in the Radiance Federation, including ordinary people, looked up at the sky. This was because the current situation had suddenly changed. It was originally afternoon, and the sun had just started to incline to the west. In just the blink of an eye, the sky had turned from white to dark. The scorching sun also turned into a bright crescent moon. However, the moonlight that was scattered by this bright moon was abnormally cold. 166 Reading Network. Chapter 491. The Moon Empress listened to the voice coming from the other end of the phone. Lin Yuan was sucked into a Class 3-dimensional rift outside Indigo Azure City. Furthermore, this Class 3-dimensional rift seemed to have encountered some problems that caused it to evolve. The Moon Empress' expressionless face suddenly blossomed into a smile. This smile was like an epiphyllum with an instant of brilliance. Just as the Moon Empress revealed a smile, the bright moon that had replaced the blazing sun and sprinkled down cold moonlight was suddenly dyed with a layer of blood red. The bright moon was dyed with blood, and the originally cold and clear moonlight suddenly turned into a boiling murderous intent. At that moment, the pupils of all the experts in the Radiance Federation who were looking at the horizon contracted at the same time. Many ordinary people who were looking at the sky seemed to have unlocked their sealed memories. He suddenly thought of a day 10 years ago when a blood-stained moon hung high in the night sky. When Mystic Moon saw the Moon Empress expression, he was alarmed. How intense must the Moon Empress' murderous intent and worry for His Highness be for the Moon Empress to laugh out of extreme anger? However, the anger and worry in Xianyu's heart weren't any lesser than the Moon Empress. Although Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress' disciple, he wasn't related to her by blood. However, this master-disciple relationship allowed Lin Yuan to be considered the Moon Empress' only descendant. The Moon Empress naturally viewed it as a treasure. Even the Moon Empress, who had always been domineering, had to carefully consider His Highness' feelings when doing things. Xianyu might not be as meticulous with Lin Yuan as the Moon Empress. However, when he addressed Lin Yuan as Uncle Mystic, Mystic Moon also treated Lin Yuan as her only junior. However, the more Xianyu cared about Lin, the more worried she was. When the dimensional rift evolved, even if the Moon Empress had already reached that level, she wouldn't be able to do so. However, it could only destroy the evolving dimensional rift. It still could not change the truth of this world's spatial laws. When the dimensional rift evolved, tear open the dimensional rift and rescue Her Highness. If one was sucked into an evolving dimensional rift, the only way to survive would be to safely spend some time inside. When the dimensional rift completed its evolution and opened again, the people inside would have the opportunity to come out again. Xianyu immediately asked when the Moon Empress hung up the phone. Moon Empress, the Class 3 water dimensional rift that was originally controlled will return to its original pinnacle Class 3 strength during the evolution process. Your Highness. Before Mystic Moon finished speaking, the Moon Empress' cold voice echoed. Follow me to the dimensional rift's entrance and wait for my disciple's return. How could the Moon Empress not know that during the evolution process, the controlled dimensional rift would return to its previous intensity? However, the Moon Empress wasn't worried about such dangers. The Moon Empress had been paying attention to Black's identity and had walked over step by step. Lin Yuan had a lot of secrets and so did his abilities. Even without the extreme token that she had given him, the Moon Empress believed that he could find a chance to survive in the pinnacle Class 3 water world dimensional rift. However, at the juncture of the active period of the dimensional rift, Lin Yuan had accidentally discovered such a huge secret hidden in the coastal sea of Indigo Azure City. The true danger that Lin Yuan had to face did not come from the dimensional lifeforms inside the dimensional rift, but the enemies that were plotting everything in the dark. The worry on the Moon Empress' face grew stronger. If she had plotted everything in secret, would she have allowed the pinnacle Class 3 water world dimensional rift to only evolve by one grade? For the first time, the Moon Empress felt a sense of powerlessness. This sense of powerlessness made her clench her fists. The Moon Empress' sense of powerlessness didn't come from her strength. Even if she could sublimate the mountains, rivers, and seas into gaseous, liquid, and solid states, she could still raise the phase grade and quality like a rocket. He could also increase the phase grade and quality like a rocket, but he still couldn't change the spatial law and rescue his disciple. It was just like how a dead person couldn't be resurrected. Therefore, the only thing the Moon Empress could do now was to act as a master and wait for her disciple to walk out of the evolving dimensional rift alive with a heart full of hope. She could only wait and wait. Immediately after, the Moon Empress' beautiful eyes turned cold. Standing at the moon shadow corridor, Lin Fan looked out into the distance. The tree desires tranquility, but the wind doesn't stop. This wind is actually blowing on this Empress disciple. The rabbit in the Moon Empress' arms, who was constantly gnawing on the carrot, reluctantly stopped gnawing on the carrot and put it away. Its ears, which were usually drooping, also stood up at this moment and trembled slightly. Extreme purple intent rose in its eyes. In a dark room in the spirit guard's headquarters, a black-robed woman with a black veil on her face was reading the letters in her hands. After reading each letter, the woman would either put the letters on the left side and leave them idle, or she would roll up the corners of the letters and leave them on the right side. At that moment, the black-robed woman with a black veil on her face suddenly became solemn. She put down the letters she was reading and appeared in front of the chief guard pavilion in a flash. When the two elders in front of the pavilion saw the black-robed woman suddenly appear, they hurriedly bowed. "Chief guard, may you rest in peace." After saying that, one of the elders bowed again and said, "Chief guard Yi, look at the Moon Empress." The other elder also hurriedly said, "Chief guard Yi, why don't you go and persuade?" The black-robed woman with a black veil on her face ignored the two elders and looked at the sky. 10,000 miles of clouds, thousands of mountains. At the end, the moon is stained with blood. Here, Bureau Chief Yi of the Spirit Guards plucked the brightest flower from a peony in front of the Bureau Chief Guard's pavilion. She threw the peony flower into the sky. The brightest peony flower became abnormally beautiful under the blood-colored moonlight, as if it was soaked in blood. Chief Guard Yi looked deeply at the blood-stained moon in the sky. She discovered that the blood-stained moon had unknowingly turned into two. Chief Guard Ye's face was covered with a black veil, so her expression could not be seen. However, a sigh came from behind the veil. "The moonlight blooms with blood, the first and last quarter splits the moon. I can't persuade her." After a while, Chief Guard Yi looked at the two elders beside her and said, "Left and right attendants, you don't have to worry about this matter. Left and right attendants, you don't have to worry about this matter. After making arrangements for all the guard envoys, the two of you will go to the south and north respectively. One will go to Hearthstone City and the other to Cold Frost City." When the two elders heard Chief Guard Ye's words, they immediately bowed and left. 166 Reading Network. Chapter 492. On the other side, the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer stood at the entrance of the evolving dimensional rift. After hanging up the phone, the Mother of Bloodbath looked at the bright blood-colored moon in the sky and pursed its lips tightly. The thought of becoming stronger in the Mother of Bloodbath's mind had never been as strong as it was at this moment. Only by being strong enough could it better protect. At the same time, this matter made the Mother of Bloodbath understand that as a path protector, it must always maintain a vigilant attitude. Listen stood beside the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer and looked at the evolving dimensional rift entrance with obvious worry on his face. When Listen had used the willpower rune to swear to become Lin Yuan's servant, he had also used his life as a bargaining chip for his allegiance and counted it as part of the oath. Under such circumstances, if Listen died, it would not affect Lin Yuan at all. At most, it would be equivalent to Lin Yuan losing a servant. However, if Lin Yuan died, it would be completely different. Listen would also die. However, the obvious worry on Listen's face was not only for himself. Instead, he sincerely hoped that Lin Yuan, who had saved him and given him a new life, could overcome the difficulties and survive. The water world dimensional rift, which was in the midst of evolving, suddenly opened up a hole. This hole spat out three figures, a giant two-headed lizard and a strange plant. When he was spat out of the spatial rift, Lin Yuan immediately looked at the surrounding environment. After seeing the surrounding environment, Lin Yuan subconsciously let the amber button-shaped source sand at his cuff turn into a wisp of fine sand and drill into the rock formation under his feet. But then Lin Yuan's brows furrowed tightly. At that time, when he pulled out the last floating silver thread, the dimensional rift entrance suddenly appeared. Although Lin Yuan did not have time to do anything, his mind was very sharp. He knew that the 500 spatial magnetic ores and so many floating silver threads were to hide this dimensional rift that had suddenly appeared. Putting aside who had secretly set up this dimensional rift entrance, just the fact that it had opened in the sea showed that this dimensional rift was a water world dimensional rift. This showed that this dimensional rift that had suddenly appeared was a water world dimensional rift. However, the surrounding environment made Lin Yuan feel a little strange. The interior of the water world dimensional rift was very humid, and the air was filled with salty water vapor. However, it was not a world completely submerged in water. As far as the eye could see, there was not a single water world dimensional creature in sight. Water world dimensional creatures were soft-bodied creatures with tentacles. Without the existence of seawater, even moving would be a problem. In this waterless environment, high-level water world dimensional creatures might be able to rely on the large amount of water vapor in the air to create a small body of water to survive. However, to low-level water world dimensional creatures, an environment without water was undoubtedly a dead end. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly thought of the spatial fluctuations he and the Mother of Bloodbath had seen in the sea and the large amount of water world dimensional lifeforms' flesh pouring out. There was the flesh of a platinum water world dimensional creature in it. Platinum water world dimensional creatures naturally wouldn't die out of thin air, nor would they chop themselves into pieces after death. Coupled with the fact that the environment in this dimensional rift was completely different from a normal water world, it meant that there was definitely a huge problem. As Lin Yuan let the source sand turn into sand particles and drill into the dry seabed under his feet, a large amount of sand was created. Lu Jie immediately let the insect queen transform into an insect base on the spot and produce a large number of flesh-mincing blade insects. Lu Jie looked at the surrounding environment and the dimensional rift entrance that had been sealed behind him. He turned to look at Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "Lin Yuan, based on the intensity of the dimensional fluctuations at the dimensional rift entrance, this dimensional rift is at least a class 3 dimensional rift." After saying that, Lu Jie looked at the layer of violent dimensional energy in the dimensional rift and said in a deep voice, "Lin Yuan, based on the intensity of the dimensional fluctuations at the dimensional rift entrance, this dimensional rift is at least a class 3 dimensional rift." After saying that, Lu Jie looked at the layer of violent dimensional energy in the dimensional rift and continued to say in a deep voice, "Lin Yuan, this dimensional rift is at least a class 3 dimensional rift. It's at least a class 3 dimensional rift and it's still evolving." Lu Jie's 2 sentences directly revealed the seriousness of this matter. Lin Yuan knew that if the class 3 water world dimensional rift evolved, it would become a class 4 water world dimensional rift. Now that the dimensional rift was active, there were a lot of variables in it all of a sudden. A class 4 dimensional rift already had class 6 dimensional lifeforms that were equivalent to suzerain phase. If the dimensional rift evolved to class 5 due to a freak combination of factors during the active period of the dimensional rift, then there might be class 7 dimensional lifeforms that were equivalent to myth-breed phase. During the active period of the dimensional rift, the number of dimensional lifeforms that gushed out was far higher than usual. If there were really a large number of water world dimensional lifeforms that were equivalent to myth-breed phase, Indigo Azure City, which was very close to here, would instantly turn into a destroyed ruin under the sea. Lin Yuan knew that there was only one possibility for the dimensional rift to evolve. That was, there was an additional number of source-type items at the hub of this water world dimensional rift that connected to the water world. Lin Yuan had also encountered such a situation when he had been training in the Abyss dimensional rift. However, he had not directly participated at that time. Instead, the Mother of Bloodbath had taken action to solve the problem perfectly. But now, facing such a matter, only Lin Yuan, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo could complete it. During the process of the dimensional rift's evolution, Lin Yuan actually only needed to hide at his current location, which was the entrance of the dimensional rift. Once the dimensional rift completed its evolution, escaping was the safest option. In order to not let the enemies in the rift discover them, he could even let the source sand precipitate a large number of ferromanganese chain swords. The chain swords made of ferromanganese formed a spacious and enclosed space. He, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo hid inside. Then the source sand would sink the sealed ferromanganese space into the ground to hide it as much as possible. However, Lin Yuan would not do that. It was just like how Lin Yuan had chosen to defend Millstone Town to the death. In the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, it would choose to resist the Demon Sea together with everyone else. This time he also wanted to try to stop the Class 3 Water World dimensional rift beneath his feet from evolving. He still had the trump card that his master had given him. Even if he encountered a powerful enemy, he would still be able to put up a fight. Lin Yuan shifted his gaze to Lu Jia and Zhou Luo. Brother Lu, Zhou Luo, I want to go to the hub to stop the evolution of this dimensional rift. Lin Yuan's voice wasn't loud. But in the humid air, a radiant flame seemed to have been ignited. Second update, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. After the body recovers, I will resume the third update. Occasionally there will be explosive updates. Mwah. End of this chapter. Chapter 493. In the humid air, the dazzling flame was only a tiny dot at first. However, after Lin Yuan said that, the hesitant expression on Lu Jie's face disappeared. His eyes also ignited with the radiant flame. As a member of the Radiance 100 sequence, Lu Jia would naturally choose to prevent this possible disaster outside Indigo Azure City. At the same time, Lu Jia was also Lin Yuan's retainer knight. Lu Jia had long regarded Lin Yuan as his faith. It could be said that every decision Lin Yuan made was upholding Lu Jie's glory. However, the glory in faith suddenly made the radiant glow in Lu Jie's eyes brighter. After hearing Lin Yuan's thoughts, Zhou Luo was already prepared to face the upcoming battle in his heart. However, when he saw the determined look in Lin Yuan's eyes, Zhou Luo suddenly felt his heart warm up. That indistinct radiant flame seemed to have a small light spot that landed in a corner of Zhou Luo's heart. The more Lin Yuan looked at the surrounding environment, the more he felt that it was more difficult to stop this Class 3 Water World dimensional rift's evolution. The biggest problem for him now was how to find the dimensional hub that connected the Water World dimensional rift to the Water World. Lin Yuan's ethereal jellyfish had not been sucked into the dimensional rift. Lu Jia and Zhou Luo did not have any spatial source-type lifeforms that were good at sensing spatial fluctuations. Therefore they could only use the stupid method of carpet searching. The most suitable for carpet searching now were the flying insects that Lu Jia's insect queen had created. Lin Yuan said to Lu Jia, Big Brother Lu, you'll be in charge of the exploration. Big Brother Lu, you will be responsible for the investigation. Try to find the location of the dimensional rift's hub. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Lu Jia released the spiritual power in his body into the insect queen's body, which had transformed into the insect queen's base. As Lu Jia channeled a large amount of spirit qi, the insect queen's sac immediately swelled up. A large amount of green liquid energy quickly surged in the sac, and the high-frequency vibrations turned the green liquid energy into sticky insect protein. The insect protein was continuously produced and finally returned to the insect queen's body through the sac. Amidst the intense vibrations, the insect queen's 3-meter-tall insect queen suddenly expanded. The entrance to the insectoid base spat out nearly 200 meters of hurricane owlet moths like a flood. The 200 black-winged owlet moths that the insect queen had spat out were different from the black-winged owlet moths that he had seen before. These 200 hurricane owlet moths didn't have such powerful wind elemental energy ripples. The hurricane owlet moths were probably used by Lu Jia to conserve his own spiritual energy and the insect queen's energy. He had only replicated a portion of the hurricane owlet moth's genetic model and produced an incomplete existence. Lu Jia commanded the insect queen to produce these incomplete hurricane owlet moths, and they immediately flapped their wings and rose into the air. In this Class 3 Water World dimensional rift that was in the process of evolving, it flew out in a net-like pattern. With Lu Jia's current location as the center point, the scattered hurricane owlet moths could act as Lu Jia's eyes in this dimensional rift. No matter what, the most important thing to do in this unfamiliar place was to gather information. Investigate and grasp the surrounding environment and possible enemies. Since Lin Yuan had decided to stop the dimensional rift's evolution, he would inevitably clash with the hidden enemies in the dimensional rift. Therefore, the first step to understand the enemy's movements and situation so that they would not become deaf and mute was the next most important task. Lu Jia said as he looked at Lin Yuan. Given the size of the Class 3-dimensional rift, these hurricane owlet moths will need at least 6 hours to roughly explore it. Upon hearing Lu Jia's words, Lin Yuan frowned even harder. Based on the current time, there was only less than a day before the active period of the dimensional rift. The dimensional rift would only need 12 hours to complete its evolution. If Lin Yuan wanted to stop the dimensional rift's evolution, he would need to do it within 12 hours. The fact that they had been sucked into the dimensional rift meant that the dimensional rift was still open and had yet to evolve. Instead, the dimensional rift had only begun to evolve after they had been sucked in. Lu Jie's hurricane owlet moths needed 6 hours to complete their search, which cut the original 12 hours in half. However, being anxious wouldn't solve any problems. Lin Yuan naturally understood this principle. He summoned the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur, Blackie, which he had rarely summoned before. The last time he had summoned Blackie, it had just been a spirit-gather goldfish. After summoning Blackie, Lin Yuan let it face Lu Jian himself. He released 2 consecutive spirit injections. After Blackie had evolved into a spirit-gather ichthyosaur, its ability, Spirit Injection, had also undergone significant changes. Previously, Spirit Injection had directly helped the target recover a certain amount of spiritual power. Now, after becoming a spirit-gather ichthyosaur, Blackie could use Spirit Injection again to inject a certain amount of spiritual power into the target's body. It would also attract the spirit chi in the air into the target's body for a certain period of time and convert it into spiritual power. Lin Yuan didn't think much of this change at first. After all, the amount of spirit chi in the air was simply too little in the outside world. Therefore, the new effect of this skill seemed to be negligible. However, in the evolving Class 3 Water World Dimensional Rift, the concentration of spirit chi in the air was far higher than that of the outside world. This also greatly increased the Spirit Injection's effect. It could even be said that the spirit-gather ichthyosaur's spirit injection here directly recovering spiritual power was not as much as the effect of being guided to absorb the spirit chi in the air and convert it into spiritual power. Lu Jie didn't expect Lin Yuan to actually nurture such a support fey that could increase the body's spiritual power. For Lu Jie, the most frightening thing about commanding the insect queen in battle was the lack of spiritual power in his body. Therefore, Lu Jie had always been strictly calculating the use of spiritual power in his body. Now that the spirit-gather ichthyosaur could directly restore the body's spiritual power, Lu Jie no longer had to worry about the consumption of spiritual power in his body. At once, Lu Jie consumed the spiritual power in his body and ordered the insect queen to produce 200 incomplete hurricane owlet moths. The multiplied number of hurricane owlet moths could better find the hub location of source-type items in the evolving dimensional rift during the exploration process. It was originally estimated to take 6 hours, but in less than 3 hours, Lu Jie's tightly closed eyes opened. After opening his eyes, Lu Jie's expression was exceptionally solemn. I'm asking for monthly votes and recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 494. Lu Jie used the insect queen's consciousness to attach to the produced hurricane owlet moths and investigate for 3 hours. Lin Yuan had been madly overdrawing the spiritual power in his body. Activating the source sand, it shattered a large number of rocks under the seabed and produced fine sand particles. Lin Yuan stomped his feet and could not help but sigh. The hardness of the rocks under this water world dimensional rift's seabed was really not just for show. It was many times harder than the purplish-black soil in the Abyss Dimensional Rift. Back then, in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, in order to ensure the strength of the produced gravel, Li Yuanfeng had to use the Level 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. Lin Yuan had purposely made the source sand dig 100 meters underground. To dig through the muddy rocks 100 meters underground. However, the source sand's grinding efficiency was already very low for the rocks 10 meters below the seabed. It could be said that it was extremely difficult for the source sand to create sand in such an environment. Even if the ferromanganese was plated on the surface of the gravel and polished, it was still far from Lin Yuan's expectations. In the end, after making some choices, Lin Yuan decided to only let the source sand create sand in the rock stratum that was 1 to 2 meters deep. The deeper the seabed, the harder the rock was. The source sand production speed could barely keep up with Lin Yuan's needs by creating sand in the rock stratum that was 1 to 2 meters deep. However, it had to be said that the quality of the gravel produced by the source sand this time was amazing. It was far superior to the quality of the gravel that Lin Yuan had produced in the previous battle. However, the rate of spiritual power consumption in his body was now 3 times faster than usual. Even if the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur was constantly using spirit injection on Lin Yuan, it would not stop. Lin Yuan still felt that the spiritual power reserves in his body were about to be emptied. After all, Lin Yuan was only a C-rank spirit chi professional. Upon seeing Lu Jie open his eyes, Lin Yuan hurriedly asked, "Brother Lu, what did the hurricane owlet moth find out?" When Lu Jie opened his eyes, his expression was unusually ugly. It was obvious that he had discovered some bad news. Lu Jie said sternly, "I should have found the location of the dimensional hub. I've also discovered many living figures in this area." Upon hearing Lu Jie's words, Lin Yuan replied with a smile despite his unusually grim expression. "That's a good thing. After all, we're halfway ahead of the predicted 6 hours." Lin Yuan paused for a moment before continuing. "Brother Lu, help me spawn 2 more hurricane owlet moths and slowly fly toward the dimensional hub." Lu Jie froze when he heard Lin Yuan's request, but he immediately let the insect queen create 2 more hurricane owlet moths. At that moment, Lin Yuan didn't hesitate to activate the spirit chi imprint that he had been accumulating previously. The moment Lin Yuan undid the spirit chi imprint, Blackie's exclusive skill, spirit chi imprint, immediately lit up. Immediately afterward, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo were shocked to find that there seemed to be a tsunami-like spiritual power bursting out of Lin Yuan's body. Lin Yuan channeled the spirit chi from the spirit chi imprint into the source sand beneath his feet. The source sand, which had already spread a few kilometers away in the past 3 hours, quickly moved in the direction the hurricane owlet moth had pointed. It shattered the rocks on the seabed and extended toward the hub of the dimensional rift. With the infusion of Lin Yuan's massive amount of spirit chi, the source sand was producing gravel at a speed that was several times faster than before. It could completely keep up with the slow-flying speed of the hurricane owlet moths. After Lu Jie spawned 2 new hurricane owlet moths, he shouted at the insect queen, "Use blast recovery." Immediately after, the insect queen's body lit up with many green lusters, and a large amount of green liquid suddenly flowed back from its sac. While Lu Jie commanded the insect queen to produce flesh-mincing blade insects, he continued to tell Lin Yuan about the situation he had just observed. The enemy has about 60 to 70 spirit chi professionals with platinum phase and no less than 20 with diamond phase. My hurricane owlet moths were created with only a portion of the genetic panel, so their combat ability isn't complete. Therefore, the hurricane owlet moths in this range didn't break through the encirclement of these spirit chi professionals with diamond phase and reach the central area. Therefore, I'm not sure if there are more powerful forces in the central area. After Lu Jie finished speaking, he added another sentence. I can't confirm the spirit chi professionals observed by the hurricane owlet moths, but most of their contracted phase are species that don't exist in the Radiance Federation. When Lu Jie said this, the expression on his masked face could not be seen clearly. However, his eyes revealed obvious killing intent. Lin Yuan was not surprised by Lu Jie's situation. As early as when he had discovered so many spatial magnetic ores, Lin Yuan had vaguely guessed it. It was just that Lin Yuan's investigation had confirmed his previous guess. Upon hearing Lu Jie's description of the opponent's strength, Lin Yuan immediately felt an unprecedented pressure. Lin Yuan's contracted source sand had reached Gold Eye/Fantasy Eye and was about to advance to Fantasy 2. In terms of strength, it was only the standard of a Platinum Fae. Lu Jie had the Platinum/Fantasy breed Insect Queen, but its strength was only the standard of a Diamond Fae. As a King-class expert, Zhou Luo had the Diamond Eye/Fantasy Eye Lava Dragon Lizard, which could be said to be stronger than Lin Yuan and Lu Jie. However, the Lava Dragon Lizard was just a defense-type Fae. It was good at defense, not offense. Therefore, the disparity in combat power between the enemy and him was too great. In fact, it was even possible that the other party possessed even greater combat prowess that they had yet to discover. Lin Yuan touched the extreme token hanging on his neck. It seemed that he had to use it if he wanted to win. Lin Yuan took off the extreme token hanging on his neck and said to Lu Jie and Zhou Luo, "This contains an expert's range attack. There's an area of effect attack from a powerhouse in here. In terms of strength, the strength of this range attack should be able to break the few red crystal spiders that the Mother of Bloodbath threw to us on the deserted island." Lin Yuan did not fully know the Moon Empress' strength. He only knew that his master, the Moon Empress, was a revered Class 5 creation master and was very powerful. However, since she could help the Mother of Bloodbath get through the world cleansing, In terms of strength, she must be stronger than the mother of bloodbath. Lin Yuan showed his trump card to Lu Jie and Zhou Luo. On the one hand, he wanted to tell Lu Jie and Zhou Luo his plan. On the other hand, it was to restore Lu Jie and Zhou Luo's confidence in such a situation. Second, please recommend votes and monthly votes. The stitches are about to be removed. It's finally going to get better. End of this chapter. Chapter 495. A golden chariot streaked across the clear skies of the ocean. It left golden ripples in the air above the ocean, making the entire sky look more like a golden ocean than the vast ocean below. The golden ocean in the sky was bathed in the glory of victory. It was as if the entire sky had transformed into a golden ocean, singing the praises of victory after victory. In front of the chariot, there were 2 warhorses carved from metal, shining with a golden luster, raising their manes. The golden chariot carried with it the might of a monarch ruling over the world. On the chariot, there was a woman with golden eyes and a head of golden hair that hung down to her shoulders. Her face was expressionless. However, it gave the world a solemn and dignified air. Suddenly, several dragon breaths shot into the sky, sweeping toward the golden chariot from the ocean. The ocean was clearly blue, but the dragon breaths that swept across the sky were pitch black like ink. Several pitch-black dragon breaths seemed to form a gloomy world, trying to shatter the glorious golden ocean in the sky. At this moment, the manes of the 2 warhorses on the golden chariot flashed with a faint layer of golden light. This faint layer of golden light seemed to form a realm of its own. It kept the pitch-black dragon breaths at bay, not allowing them to advance even an inch. When the pitch-black dragon breaths sensed that they were unable to break through this layer of golden light, they immediately turned into chains. In an instant, the golden chariot and the expressionless woman within the chariot were imprisoned. A playful smile appeared on the face of the golden-haired, golden-eyed woman. There was an indescribable hint of mockery in this playful smile. And there was a hint of pity in her golden eyes, as if she was giving alms. I presume that you have been waiting for me here for a long time. As soon as the golden-haired, golden-eyed woman's voice fell, several ink-colored satin floated up from the ocean, covering the sky and covering the earth. Each piece of ink-colored satin flickered with a gloomy luster, making them look extremely smooth. In an instant they completely covered the azure ocean. A skinny old man stood on one of the ink-colored satin, and beside him was an extremely young woman with short hair. The old man stood one step behind the short-haired woman, and his expression was one of respect and love for the short-haired woman. The short-haired woman stared at the golden-haired, golden-eyed woman in the sky. His originally black pupils were filled with blood and turned dark red. Just from the look in her eyes, one could tell that this short-haired woman had a shocking hatred for the golden-haired, golden-eyed woman in the chariot in the sky. The old man raised his head and looked at the golden-haired, golden-eyed lady in the sky and said coldly, "Seventh Page War, you have to pay for what you did in the Dark Continent." The woman's tone of mockery and pity became even more pronounced upon hearing this. "You want me to pay the price? Just because of the nether sea jellyfish beneath your feet?" As soon as Seventh Page War finished speaking, the sea began to surge violently. A huge black jellyfish with purple flowing lights emerged from the bottom of the sea. When the canopy at the top opened and closed, it seemed as if it could swallow the entire sea. Then a huge repulsive force came from the nether seawater jellyfish, which was completely black and had purple light flowing around its body. Then the nether sea jellyfish compressed all the seawater into a black water droplet. This black water droplet, which carried the weight of the sea, went straight toward the golden chariot in the sky. Seventh Page War, who was sitting on the golden chariot, looked at the black water droplets spat out by the nether sea jellyfish and nether sea jellyfish in the sea below the chariot and raised his hand in disdain. The golden chariot suddenly shone brightly as if it had become a sun. In an instant the dark world created by the nether sea jellyfish was dispelled by the brilliant light. The 2 war horses that were pulling the carriage neighed twice, instantly shattering the black water droplets that were attacking them. A curtain of rain soaked with golden luster fell from the sky. The curtain of rain soaked with golden luster fell on the black silk-like tentacles of the nether sea jellyfish. Tiny holes were directly burned into the surface one after another. It was not too late to burn the small holes. These burnt holes were expanding rapidly, corroding the black satin-like tentacles of the nether sea jellyfish until they were unrecognizable. The old man immediately mobilized the spiritual power in his body to command the nether sea jellyfish to continue supporting a dark world to resist. At that moment, 7th Page War frowned. A look of surprise and conflict appeared on his originally expressionless face. Then, as if he had received some bad news, his face turned completely cold. The expression on 7th Page War's face was terrifyingly cold, but it was as if there was something urgent that he did not need to do. He was not in a hurry to take action. At that moment, the eyes of the short-haired woman beside the old man, which had turned dark red because of hatred, instantly turned pink. A bewitching pink flower appeared in the short-haired woman's hand. The moment this pink flower appeared in the short-haired woman's hand, her aura changed. Her original unswerving determination had turned into an indescribably charming one. She was like a goddess of beauty who suddenly appeared in the dark sea and the flickering glow in the sky. It could inspire anyone to fall in love with her. The short-haired woman rose into the air and appeared next to 7th Page War in a flash. She held the bewitching pink flower in her hand and asked 7th Page War softly. 7th Page War, am I beautiful? 7th Page War's eyes flashed with sarcasm and playfulness for a moment, but it was hidden in the blink of an eye. Then 7th Page War seemed to become a young girl in love as he murmured with infinite shyness on his face. Beautiful. When the short-haired woman heard this, the hatred in her pink eyes grew stronger, but the words she said became more and more flirtatious. 7th Page War, do you love me? The shyness on 7th Page War's face grew stronger. Yes. The short-haired woman used the most gentle voice as if she was seducing him. If you love someone, you have to give everything for that person. If you love me, can you die for me now? As soon as the woman's voice fell, the infatuation and shyness on 7th Page War's face seemed to turn into sorrow in an instant. However, he did not hesitate to raise his hand in front of him as if he was ready to make a move and end his life at any time. A look of relief appeared on the short-haired woman's face. There was no joy of revenge in her expression, only sadness and nostalgia. Just when the short-haired woman thought that 7th Page War was about to kill himself in front of her, a pair of hands reached in front of the short-haired woman with unquestionable power and grabbed the bewitching pink flower in the short-haired woman's hand. With a forceful pinch, the petals and stamen of the bewitching pink flower were all crushed into powder by 7th Page War's fingers. First update: seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 496. A look of disbelief appeared on the short-haired woman's face. All that was left of the beautiful flower in his hand was a short stem and a root. Impossible. The mocking expression in 7th Page War's eyes was vividly revealed at this moment. Sacred Source Life Form, Absolute Love Poppy. This is the first time I've seen a sacred source life form that can manipulate the soul of the same kind. It's really good stuff. Just as 7th Page War was speaking, the golden chariot under 7th Page War's feet disappeared. 7th Page War stood in the air and looked at everything under his feet with a disdainful expression. The Dark Envoy jointly chosen by the 7 Dark States is actually an expert who plays with emotions at the soul level. How interesting. The Dark Continent has now become a cornerstone under the Pagoda canon. I don't have time to deal with you, but you took the initiative to send yourself to me. Because you obstructed me and delayed my important matters, you deserve death. Since you wasted one of my sacred source life forms, I'll use all of you to make wax figures and slowly repay you under the baptism spring. 7th Page War frowned slightly. He did not expect the Radiance Federation's arrangements to be discovered. But no matter who you are, this sacred source life form is not that easy to obtain. The Radiance Federation must eat the big gift that I've prepared with added chips. However, 7th Page War vented his anger on the old man and the woman in front of him. The short-haired woman still had a look of disbelief on her face. You've been charmed by the sacred source life form, Absolute Love Poppy. Even if you're stronger than me, I can feel it in advance when you break free from my charm. 7th Page War's anger surged, and he had lost interest in talking to this short-haired woman. When have I ever been charmed? I'm not the same kind as you. As soon as 7th Page War's voice fell, golden light flowed all over 7th Page War's body, and he turned into a golden datura flower. The short-haired woman cried out in horror. You're actually not a human. You're a plant fae. Just as seventh page war returned to its original body, the old man on the tentacle of the nether sea jellyfish made a prompt decision to summon a small silver tuna-like fish. Then the nether sea jellyfish beneath the old man's feet started burning like a withered tree. Sensing the old man's movements, 2 golden petals shot out from the petals of the golden mandara flower that the seventh page war had transformed into. The light and shadow of the 2 petals seemed to contain the grandeur of 2 battles. The old man completely disregarded the safety of the nether sea jellyfish. The nether sea jellyfish, which was enormous in size and had more than half of its tentacles still in the sea, wrapped itself with its black, silk-like tentacles. Then it used its huge body to greet the 2 golden flower petals. At this time, the silver tuna-like fish had already torn the space apart. The old man immediately pulled the short-haired woman and fled into the tear in space. In just an instant, the nether sea jellyfish that came into contact with the 2 golden petals turned into rags and scattered on the surface of the sea. Soon after, it sank towards the deep sea, bringing life to the deep sea that far exceeded that of a large-scale whale fall. One of the golden silhouettes didn't slow down after destroying the nether sea jellyfish. However, it still allowed the short-haired woman and the old man to escape into the tear in space created by the silver fish. However, half of the old man's body was hit by the golden petal light, and that half of his body immediately became the same as the nether sea jellyfish. Seventh page war stood in the sky above the turbulent sea, watching the various ferocious sea beasts nibbling at the feast left behind after the nether sea jellyfish exploded. It was just that the energy contained in the flesh of the nether sea jellyfish was too high. Many greedy sea beasts that didn't meet the requirements were blown to pieces by this energy. This also brought a feast for other weaker sea beasts. In just an instant, the sea was dyed red by the blood of countless sea beasts. At this moment, seventh page war suddenly raised its head, changing its previous disdainful attitude. Instead, it looked at the sky with a solemn expression. The sky suddenly darkened and a long, silent night descended. A bright moon rose high in the silent night sky. In just a moment, the bright moon was dyed with a layer of blood. The bright moon that suddenly appeared in the sky instantly divided into a crescent moon, and the crescent moon was dyed with a blood-colored luster. Seventh page war felt the endless murderous intent in the blood-colored crescent moon. Seventh page war frowned even more. At that moment, the words that came out of seventh page war's mouth no longer contained the pity and mockery from before. There was only solemnity. The moonlight blooms with blood and the crescent moon splits. It seems that there's no need for me to go to the Radiance Federation anymore. Just as seventh page war was about to summon the Radiance Chariot to return, it suddenly repeated the expression that the short-haired woman had when she used the sacred source life form, the absolute love poppy. Then seventh page war returned to its previous appearance and said softly, "It actually has such a strong charm on the souls of non-similar creatures. It actually has such a strong charm effect on the souls of creatures that aren't of the same species. The absolute love poppy is really not bad. But in the end there won't be a chance for it to bloom again." While speaking, seventh page war shook the flower mud left behind after the absolute love poppy was crushed in his hand in disgust. The Radiance Chariot went far away, leaving a sentence on the sea. Pink and flirtatious flowers are really vulgar. The kind of plant that can eat meat, look at me with deep feelings and bloom a sea of flowers for me in the blink of an eye will make me fall in love. This sentence lingered for a moment before it was blown away by the rapid sea breeze. Big Brother Lu, try to let the produced flesh-mincing blade insects drill into the seabed under your feet. Lin Yuan's words made Lu Jia a little confused. Lu Jia was still producing the lightning-gathering moths and plasma caterpillars without stopping. To the enemy, the lightning beam that the lightning-gathering moths could release after being charged with plasma by the plasma caterpillars. This was the strongest attack that they could use at present. Whenever the produced plasma caterpillars could not spit out more plasma, Lu Jia would let the insect queen use its exclusive skill, Blast Recovery. Lu Jia got the insect queen to use its exclusive skill, Blast Recovery. It treated the plasma caterpillars that had lost their value as scrap and self-destructed to recover their energy. This would maximize the maximum value of every trace of energy in the insect queen's body. After listening to Lin Yuan's instructions, Lu Jia was ready to let the flesh-mincing blade insects try to use their blade-like insect limbs to dig the seabed. However, in Lu Jia's opinion, even if the flesh-mincing blade insects could drill into the seabed with the hardness of the seabed under their feet, they would only be able to hide and would completely lose their mobility. At that moment, Lu Jia suddenly realized that a huge quicksand vortex had suddenly appeared on the seabed under Lin Yuan's feet. Lu Jia's eyes lit up and he immediately understood what Lin Yuan meant. Zhou Luo looked at the quicksand vortex that suddenly appeared under Lin Yuan's feet and the insect sea behind Lu Jia and swallowed hard. The younger generation these days was too fucking strong. Second update: seeking recommendation votes, seeking monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 497. In Zhou Luo's opinion, as a member of the Radiance 100 sequence number 30, it was understandable that Lu Jia had such strength. After all, the top members of the Radiance 100 sequence had combat power that was comparable to a king-class expert. Zhou Luo compared his strength before he met Lin Yuan. With the strength of a Platinum 9/Fantasy Eye Iron Bone splitting lizard facing the massive swarm of insects created by Lu Jia's insect queen, he couldn't help but think to himself. How long could he hold on? As a king-class expert, Zhou Luo naturally had the strength of an A-rank spirit chi professional. The amount of spiritual energy in his body was much higher than Lu Jia's. However, Lu Jia's insect queen's exclusive skill could detonate the produced insects. On one hand, these exploding insects could be used as energy for the insect queen to recover. On the other hand, the exploding bugs themselves dealt quite a bit of damage. At this rate, it was hard to say if his lava dragon lizard would be killed by the swarm created by Lu Jia's insect queen. The strength displayed by Lu Jia made Zhou Luo understand the strength of the younger generation. The strength that Lin Yuan displayed completely shocked Zhou Luo. Zhou Luo had seen what Lin Yuan looked like without his mask. At that time, Zhou Luo had been very surprised that Lin Yuan had so many resources but was actually so young. Zhou Luo had found out about Black's identity later on. However, when Zhou Luo saw the strength Lin Yuan displayed now, it was clearly much stronger than the ability Black had displayed on Star Web previously. This meant that Lin Yuan, who was Black, had previously maintained a winning streak in the Celestial Stairway duels in the Star Tower. However, he was still concealing his strength and didn't fully display it. Coupled with Lin Yuan's tsunami-like spiritual power, Zhou Luo was even more alarmed. Zhou Luo could sense that Lin Yuan was injecting a large amount of spiritual power into his feet, but he did not know that as Lin Yuan injected a large amount of spiritual power into the elemental source-type item under his feet, how many parts of the seabed had been shattered and turned into rolling yellow sand? Lu Jia was currently commanding a large number of flesh-mincing blade insects to drill into the huge quicksand vortex that suddenly appeared under Lin Yuan's feet. As a large number of flesh-mincing blade insects drilled into the quicksand vortex, Lu Jia's eyes became brighter and brighter. The insect queen attached its consciousness to the flesh-mincing blade insect. Lu Jia saw how big of a project Lin Yuan had created in the seabed under his feet in just a few hours. There were several tunnels on the seabed that led to the dimensional rift. The size of the tunnel was big enough for 5 flesh-mincing blade insects to pass through side by side. Even the shield ladybugs could travel freely in the tunnel on the seabed. The connection and arrangement of several tunnels allowed the flesh-mincing blade insects that entered the quicksand under the seabed to form an orderly swarm. All of Lu Jia's combat power, which had been in the open, had been transferred to the shadows. The quicksand in the seabed could also greatly enhance the mobility of the flesh-mincing blade insects. The flesh-mincing blade insects in the quicksand could be transported to any place in the underground tunnel, and the swarm could directly engage in battle. Brother Lu, let's start the explosion. He took a deep breath and injected the majestic spiritual power in his body into Blackie's body. The spirit-drawing ichthyosaur Blackie kept injecting spiritual energy into Lu Jia to help him recover his depleted spiritual energy. Lu Jia suddenly realized that after the massive amount of spiritual power in Lin Yuan's body boiled up. Now Lin Yuan urged the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur to perform the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur spirit injection without caring about the spiritual power consumption in his body. The spiritual power in his body was like a person with kidney deficiency who had eaten a kidney treasure. Fierce, fierce, fierce. His spiritual power began to rise. Lu Jie immediately injected the rapidly recovering spiritual power in his body into the insect queen's body and commanded it to continue producing the flesh-mincing blade insects, shield ladybugs, plasma caterpillars, lightning-gathering moths and hurricane owlet moths. He expanded the swarm of insects he controlled to the greatest extent. Lu Jie understood that he was currently the core output position in the combat team formed by him, Lin Yuan and Zhou Luo. In order to maximize the team's damage, Lu Jie could be said to have spared no effort to produce the swarm of insects in the most optimal ratio. Lin Yuan had also clarified his position in this battle. It was also the responsibility that he had to play in the next battle. Lin Yuan was now considered an all-rounder. However, his defense was still relatively weak. After all, Lin Yuan's defense was mostly for personal protection. In the current team, the King-class defense-type Spirit Chi professional Zhou Luo was fully responsible for the defense. There was no need for Lin Yuan to intervene at all. In terms of output, since Chimey was asleep, Lin Yuan could only use Red Thorn, the acid corrosion bees and the source sand. Although Red Thorn's Sea of Flowers was extremely powerful against large-scale dimensional life forms, its silver/fantasy breed strength was still far inferior to the current combat level. In the end, Red Thorn's silver/fantasy breed strength was still far from the current combat level. Therefore, Lin Yuan defined himself as a healer and support position. The Jasmine Lily was fully responsible for the healing. The support was replenished by the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur, Blackie, and the source sand had a controlling effect. It could also attach a thin layer of sand shield to the flesh-mincing blade insects and shield ladybugs to help resist and share some of the damage. The thin sand shield's effect was not obvious on a single insect. However, if it could be used to enhance the entire insect swarm, the effect would be immeasurable. Of course, all of this was determined by Lin Yuan not caring about the consumption of the accumulated spirit chi in the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur's exclusive skill, Spirit Chi Imprint. For example, Lin Yuan treated himself as a high-capacity power bank. He transferred the spiritual power in his body to Lu Jie's body through the spirit injection method. 2 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Lin Yuan supported the source sand to continue creating sand on the seabed while helping Lu Jie recover his spiritual power. In these 2 hours, Lin Yuan had squandered the spiritual power content in the Spirit Chi imprint to only 1/3. Zhou Luo felt increasingly numb at the side. Zhou Luo had forgotten how many insects he had seen burrowing into the quicksand vortex on the seabed. Even the flying insect species phase, the lightning-gathering owlet moth and the hurricane owlet moth, wrapped their bodies with their wings and burrowed into the yellow sand under their feet. This was truly a terrifying pair of master and servant. In 2 hours, this pair of master and servant had increased their original combat power by many times. Lin Yuan felt the existence of the insects that Lu Jie had commanded the insect queen to produce in the source sand and felt a little more confident. In the process of controlling the quicksand to transport the insect swarm, Lin Yuan suddenly felt a unique charm of positional warfare. First update: seeking recommendations, monthly votes. The biggest battle since the start of this book had finally begun. I've been writing and editing recently. Sob, sob, sob. Maybe I'll send it a little slower. I'll stabilize my body and recover my body. End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.